Hello and welcome to Redshirt Cinema Club, a weekly podcast about fandom and watching things with friends. Yes, it is time. We're watching The Lord of the Rings, because after all, why not? Starting with The Fellowship of the Ring, join us for the behind-the-scenes story of how the movies got made, hilarious scene-by-scene commentary, and a bit of mailbag. Has the undeniable magic of this film withstood both the test of time and the test of countless viewings? Let's find out.
Legend tells of a ring created by an ancient evil that gave its wearer the power to enslave the world. Believed lost for centuries, it has now been found.
Is it secret? Is it safe?
This is the One Ring, forged by the Dark Lord Sauron. Sauron needs only this ring to cover all the lands of a second darkness. He's seeking it all. His thought is bent on it.
No one knows it's here, do they? Do they, Gandalf?
The weapon of the enemy is a gift. Let us use it against him.
You cannot wield it. None of us can.
The ring must be destroyed.
It was made in the fires of Mount Doom. Only there can it be unmade.
I know what I must do, but I'm afraid to do it.
One does not simply walk into Mordor.
There is no other way. There's something down there.
Are you frightened?
Yes.
Not nearly frightened enough.
Hello and welcome to Redshirt Cinema Club. I am your host, bald, hateful, spite-filled ring addict Rob Pearson. We're not doing the usual fun character-related intros, just
I thought that was bang on.
just speaking the normal truth. And we are joined today by distant relation-hating, older than he looks, unwitting instigator of shitstorms everyone else then has to deal with, Nathan Dighton. And affable, not invited to the secret council meeting, unsung hero, David Jackson.
Yeah.
We have just watched Peter Jackson's 2001 fantasy adventure, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, the theatrical edition, to be precise. And we are going to do things a little differently today. We're not going to do a 90-second synopsis. Instead, we're going to talk through the film act by act. I've got some questions for you all after that. And then Dave, I believe, has prepared some mailbag. But before all of that, Nathan has been locked away in his comfy hobbit hole with his pipe and his hairy feet, writing up the behind-the-scenes tale of how The Lord of the Rings came to be. So, Nathan, over to you for this first bit.
Yes. This is another bit of my unfinished thesis. We're going to run out of these sooner or later. Now, actually, so sooner.
So you did write quite a bit of it.
I did. Do you know when you go back and you write and you read something you've written and sometimes you're like, oh, that's really good. I didn't think that. When I went back and this was unfinished and I could see all the problems with it. But I basically just ripped out all the information. So this is a context of and a small history of the career of Peter Jackson before Lord of the Rings, then up to the point of getting the Lord of the Rings made. One of the questions was why the name of the villain, Harvey Weinstein, was in the credits. We will answer that by the end of
I'm
this
excited to find out.
short section. So Peter Jackson's first film was Bad Taste, which was released in 1987. But before that, he'd been making for years films on his family's Super 8 camera, 8mm camera. And he'd always been obsessed with special effects, mostly. That was part of it wasn't so much story that got him into filmmaking, it was special effects. And he describes, for instance, one of the first things he ever made, which was a First World War themed short movie. In order to simulate gunfire from my homemade machine gun, I used a pin to poke holes through the celluloid frame by frame onto the barrel of the gun in order to create a burst of whiteness when the film was projected. So even as a child, he was very much into special effects.
I love that.
And that's what he was making. Other similar projects used used a stop motion model of King Kong and a copy of Ray Harryhausen's Cyclops from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. These were the things that he was trying to recreate. And Bad Taste, as I said, released in 1987, which is about an alien invasion, was a direct continuation of these early films just into his 20s. And although it marks a move from 8mm to 16mm film, it remained a totally independent and self-funded production, at least at the beginning. Lots of changes occurred. He was basically making a film just with his friends, and lots of changes occurred during the filming. Kim Newman reviewed the movie in Monthly Film Bulletin when it eventually came out. Said the whole production has a makeshift feel that derives from 4 years of shooting, during which the project underwent radical changes. Originally, the central character was Giles, who is now marginal to the plot, but his role was diminished when actor Craig Smith got married, thus cutting down on his weekend spare time. And he developed an aversion to the chainsaw ending, whereupon the script was rewritten to make, and the team, the government team that all the lads are a part of is called the AIDS team. And the gag in the movie is they say, I wish they'd do something about those initials. And they're the main characters. The scrappiness also allowed Peter Jackson to step in, and he plays a character called Derek, the most engaging character in the film, but also caused a great deal of confusion that shows up on screen in the blatant overdubbing of all Giles's dialogue, frequently with lines said through closed lips. Yeah. So that's Bad Taste. It was intended as a vehicle for extended sequences of violence and gore. And actually, if you watch it, the thing which is fun, sometimes you see stuff which is really low budget and it's just difficult to watch. It's just tedious and boring. Bad Taste has its awful quality, as that suggests, but the special effects, there's obviously a love and an ingenuity which has gone into them, which makes them really interesting. Bad Taste was intended as a vehicle for extended sequences of violence and gore. The director himself reveals as much in a letter that he wrote to the New Zealand Film Commission, which is like the British Film Institute, or I think we've got a film commission here too. He's basically asking for money to finish the film. He describes the project, and he said, rather unambitiously, that our sole aim has been to produce an addition to the ever-growing range of zero-budget schlock gore videotapes, proven video favourites worldwide.
So could I have some budget for my zero budget movie, please?
Exactly. And they turned him down. Eventually, so I guess it's important just for the wider context of what was happening with New Zealand film at that moment and why he was writing to the New Zealand Film Commission. That had been set up in the 70s after a short burst of more interesting films. It's called New Zealand's New Wave, and it kind of happened just after Australia's New Wave with people like Peter Weir, who has obviously gone on to do things like The Truman Show or Mad Max. And then in New Zealand, kind of next door, a few years later, there was a bit of a similar creative kick. Movies like Jeff Murphy's Wild Man and Roger Donaldson's Sleeping Dogs, if anybody wants to go and look those up. He was eventually given 200,000 New Zealand dollars to finish the film. And if you want a kind of a tone for what Bad Taste is about, basically the plot is that aliens invade. The Prime Minister rings a mysterious man and demands that this man does an all-out attack. And then he says that's a ridiculous idea and this is a job for real men. And then he reaches for a telephone and he has 4 telephones and they are PM, Queen, Mum, and the boys. And he rings the boys. Bad Taste was issued in North America by Magnum Entertainment, who also released The Hills Have Eyes and The Driller Killer. So this is the kind of area that Jackson is working in at that moment. And the back cover of the video box carried a quote from Gore Zone magazine proclaiming the film to be hilarious, head-banging horror, makes the VCR cry out for windshield wipers.
That's a good quote.
Again, video is very much kind of, and watching things at home and that video nasty, that was a whole scene. In 1989, Jackson released Meet the Feebles, which I didn't write very much about in my thesis because I didn't like it and I didn't have anything interesting to say about it. It's a grotesque puppets comedy, which is set in a theatre troupe whose cast are involved in, they're all animals and they're involved in drugs, pornography, attempted rape, murder, and suicide. It's a really unpleasant film.
God.
But it is remarkable for being the first time that he co-wrote with Fran Walsh, who would go on to be his partner and also his co-writer on all his subsequent films, and also with Richard Taylor and Weta Workshop. The tagline in some markets was, "From the director of bad taste comes a movie with no taste at all." Then he became a real kind of filmmaker in my eyes after that. I've always thought that Jackson's next two films, Brain Dead from 1992 and Heavenly Creatures 1994, are a brilliant double bill that show the dual nature of his career. And Jackson is working through this period through, as I said, an area dominated by video distribution and that video scene, but what that also enabled was people to take more risks. So actually at the same time there was kind of a mirror industry of more daring independent film production, and companies of around the same size. There's always been this interesting relationship between kind of art films and either horror or genre movies, and they often travel on the same circuits. They're obviously appealing to different markets. One's basically very broad and sort of basic and exploitation-y, and the other one is trying to be all highfalutin. Lots of companies, or two companies which are going to come really important to this story, are Miramax, which is run by Harvey Weinstein, and New Line Cinema. And New Line at this time was known for doing just horror nasty. So it did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it did the Freddy movies. I think it did Halloween later on. It did all the Leatherface movies anyway. And
Did The Mask.
Yeah, that was into the 90s when they started to get bigger budgets, and that comes into things in a sec as well. And they actually had then a section of their company called Fine Line Pictures, where they would try and do like classy, like Sundance movies. And Miramax lived in that other side, in the classy bit, and they would buy up foreign movies. Sex Lies Videotape was one of theirs, Like Water for Chocolate, The Crying Game. They did those sorts of films. But then they had Dimension Pictures, which did Scream. It basically tried to do what New Line did. So they competed with each other. They're like this weird yin and yang, like opposites of each other. And basically, Brain Dead and Heavenly Creatures is like that compacted into two films made by Peter Jackson at the same time. So Brain Dead initially just seems like another zombie movie. And I mean, it is. And it's a brilliant zombie movie. Just getting back into my notes, they're both affectionate satires of New Zealand, and specifically New Zealand in the 1950s. They're both kind of period films, which is a more socially conservative and more kind of British New Zealand, but represented through these completely different genres. Bad Taste had gotten Jackson attention from New Line Cinema, and they contacted him about directing Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and commissioned him to write an unused script for the sixth entry into the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Following the completion and rejection of that script, Jackson turned his attention to Brain Dead. Financing was again secured through the New Zealand Film Commission and also Avalon Studios, who was a studio in New Zealand at the time. And as a gag, the opening of Brain Dead parodies Raiders of the Lost Ark and also references King Kong, which is King Kong. Is why it was so interesting that King Kong was then the movie that Jackson made when he could have made anything he wanted. He's always thought about it. Basically, that opening is set on Skull Island, which is where King Kong is set, and there's a bite from a Sumatran rat monkey, which is then the source of the zombie infection, which disturbs a small New Zealand town. Later on, that rat monkey is referenced in his own King Kong and in Tintin. So just on Brain Dead, in my original thesis, I described a few scenes. Playing to his eventual video audience, Jackson revels in the corporeality of the sequence, using a series of close-ups on Vera's rotting face and Mr. Matheson's ruddy complexion in tandem with emphasized sound effects. The squelch of Vera's burst boil, the chewy crunch of her ear cartilage. Oh. So these are the kinds of scenes, again, very kind of scatological, very focused on special effects. That he was making. That film was released in North America as Dead Alive because the rights to the original name were owned by Roger Corman, appropriately enough, and it was distributed in the USA by Trimark Films, which eventually became part of Lionsgate. Heavenly Creatures, on the other hand, was an obvious move away from horror, or at least it seemed so at the time. Do you know anything about Heavenly Creatures?
No, I don't know anything about it.
Heavenly Creatures is kind of his breakout film, or the film that got him international attention outside of that video circuit. And it starred Melanie Linsky, who's now in The Last of Us and Yellow Jackets, and has had a very successful career, and Kate Winslet. And they're best friends, schoolgirls in New Zealand. And it's based on a true story that I think was incredibly infamous in New Zealand, where they became... sometimes you read stories of kids who kind of, their relationship becomes too intense and they live in a fantasy world, and then often folie à deux, that kind of idea that two people can convince themselves or live in a kind of alternate reality which leads them to do awful crimes. They murdered one of their mothers, and this is kind of a retelling of their story slightly more sympathetically. I was wondering about whether it would hold up now. Lots of different changes in the way that people viewed this kind of sympathy at that time, but they tried to tell it not as a tabloid story, and it was very well received critically internationally. But at the time, it was being reported, it was being made by distributed by Miramax, and it was therefore on the awards circuit, and it was very much considered a quality film, and people were saying, it's a maturing of Jackson as a director. And he said, I have no feeling that this marks any particular change of direction, other than this is a movie I was incredibly interested and passionate about making. And another press, he told that he's the same filmmaker I've always been, just working with a different story. And he is right. Like Brain Dead before it, Heavenly Creatures uses a repressive 1950s setting to explore the status and legitimacy of British mannerisms in New Zealand. So again, we see he is someone who loves special effects, but he works in different genres now, and his films are all about being in New Zealand, about being from New Zealand, about working in New Zealand. More specifically, though, so obviously this does represent, like I said, a kind of a crossroads between Jackson working between these two kind of spheres of what's called specialised cinema, kind of independent cinema and horror cinema. And also then for the first time working directly with one of the kind of giants of that in Miramax, who also operate on both these kind of tracks. And more specifically, Heavenly Creatures also anticipates The Lord of the Rings in its presentation of New Zealand and the New Zealand landscape. There are shots of the girls' fantasy life, which are then inhabited by digital effects, which are being used by Jackson for the first time, kind of castles and vistas. And some of the shots look a lot like the stuff that ends up finally in Lord of the Rings, if a little less impressive. As I said, the film was released by Miramax. This is October 1994. Jackson and Fran Walsh earn an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay.
Wow.
Though they do not win. And next, in 1996, Jackson released The Frighteners, which in a way is like the missing piece then between this person who's incredibly interested in special effects, has proved himself in that arena, has then made a good film, and is going to then next make The Lord of the Rings. And it comes from a treatment which was sent by Walsh and Jackson to their agent in Hollywood, and it came to the attention of Robert Zemeckis, who the Spielberg kind of protege, special effects filmmaker, blockbuster director from the 1980s, who initially thought it would make a good segment for his a TV show he was involved with called Tales from the Crypt. But then it expanded into a feature film, and then he thought it was so good that he thought it would be better if Jackson and his team made it. So he eventually helped to set up the film at Universal, which is why it's at Universal, and it starred Michael J. Fox from Zemeckis' Back to the Future. It's a fun film, nothing extraordinary, but it did represent a big learning curve for Weta in terms of digital effects. They had to shoot loads of the scenes twice because they had to have ghosts as well as humans in the scenes. So,
right.
They learnt loads about, I guess, how to make the Army of the Dead, which is one of my least favourite things about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. On to the Lord of the Rings. Our final part of this story. After Heavenly Creatures, Jackson and his team had signed a first look deal with Miramax. So anything that they wanted to make, they had to bring to Harvey Weinstein. As they were making that, they decided they wanted to make a fantasy film. And they were thinking, what could they do? They tried some concepts, and they realised everything they were thinking about really was just a pale version of Lord of the Rings. So they thought, why don't we try and get the rights? So they had to go to Harvey, and they said, well, we're thinking about making Lord of the Rings. And Harvey Weinstein said, well, who's got the rights? And they said, it's this producer who's been in Hollywood for ages called Paul Zientz. And Harvey Weinstein said, well, that's amazing. I'm currently making The English Patient with Saul Zientz, and he owes me a massive favour because I stopped that film from being cancelled by stepping in at the last minute and producing it. And obviously it then went on to be a massive success. So they did get the rights. They planned on it initially being 2 films long, and Miramax didn't want to do 3. obviously everyone's talking about the risk of doing this. The history of Lord of the Rings in Hollywood is that it's never been made successfully. Ralph Bakshi had made one half of it in animation in a version which was got some brilliant bits in it. I'm wearing a jumper of it today, but was never quite successful. So there's an element of risk around it. And also, at this point, Miramax had been, as the industry moves on, Miramax and New Line had become part of much bigger corporations. So New Line had been bought by Turner Communications, which was then eventually merged in with Warner Brothers. They're basically part of Warner Brothers at this point. And Miramax in, I think, 92 or 93 had been bought by Disney. So this kind of, Pulp Fiction is a Disney movie. Clerks is a Disney movie. Like these, it was a way for those big corporations to exploit a market they otherwise couldn't access. So Harvey Weinstein had to go to Disney and say, can I have extra budget for these films, please? And they said no. So they reached an impasse. They spent 2 years doing pre-production, writing scripts, doing early FX work. Jackson reckoned that Harvey Weinstein and Miramax spent $20 million on the pre-production of Lord of the Rings. But then they hit this block and Harvey said, well, I can't get the budget that you think this is going to take to do each of these two movies. Why don't we just do one movie? I can make them say yes to one movie. And Jackson and Walsh had a meeting with him in New York and said, we won't do just one movie. Like, it's heartbreaking and there's a whole team in New Zealand, but we just can't do that. Weinstein was then in a position where he had to try and recoup his money. So he was going to try and get a different team in to make this one film version of Lord of the Rings. Jackson and Walsh were flying from New York back to New Zealand. And in the meantime, their agent was talking to Harvey, Ken Cummins, I think his name is, was talking to Harvey and saying, look, they spent 2 years on this. Can you give them a chance to make it somewhere else? Put the film in turnaround is what it's called. And Harvey said, yes, but there's two conditions. And one is that there has to be for an offer for two movies, because I'm going to make one movie. And the other one is that whoever says yes has to give me $20 million in 4 weeks, which is just preposterous. But anyway, they land in New Zealand, they get this news and they think, okay, we've got 4 weeks, what should we do? So they go and they make a documentary, essentially, about all of the things that they've made, the props that they put together. And Jackson describes it as, they think they've come to the end of the road. They're trying to be as positive as they can in this 36-minute behind the scenes thing for a film that might never get made, but they're all dying inside, just thinking, just please, somebody make this film. And they called everyone that they could in Hollywood, and they only got 2 meetings to go and try and sell this thing because of the people saw the stipulations up front. And the first one was with Polygram, who wanted to do the movie. And again, they're I think they're originally a Dutch company, but they exist also in this space. I think they were part of the original funders of Reservoir Dogs, for instance. But they were just going through a merger. They were being sold, and so they couldn't commit to it. And the other one was with New Line. The same, I think his name's Mark Ordesky, the same executive who had commissioned Peter Jackson to write the Freddy movie, set up a meeting with the head of New Line, Bob Shaye. So they sat in this room with Bob Shaye and they watched this documentary. And apparently Jackson, again, there's a great episode of the Charlie Rose show where Jackson talks about this whole story before the films were even out. He says they sat there for 36 minutes in his office and he just watched it, just concentrating, not saying anything. And they're just there going, oh my God, please, please like him. And the lights come up at the end and Bob Shaye says, I don't get it. But then he said,
that was a terrible movie. I'm not paying for that.
He said, I don't get it. Aren't there 3 books? Why don't we do 3 movies?
Oh my God.
And then he wrote the check and that was it.
He's probably planning that, wasn't he? Yeah. I'm going to start this by saying I don't get it.
He didn't watch any of the documentary. He was just thinking the whole time, what's the best way to do a line at the end of this?
I've got bad news for you, everyone.
You're
going to have to make 3 movies.
Jackson is so funny, having been in meetings which are important to me, obviously not on the same level as this.
Yeah.
But he was saying that, Bob Shaye turned around, I don't get it. There's 3 books, and they were there like, "What's he saying? What's he saying? What does he mean?"
Yeah. There are.
And there's a Hobbit. Movies. There's a Hobbit as well. Yeah. So there we are.
Could be a whole franchise. Could be a whole thing.
So that's how the Peter Jackson. That's who he was. That's where he came from. Very much a New Zealand filmmaker, and that's the Lord of the Rings.
I do remember watching that bit in the appendices where Mark Odersky's just like, And he was like, oh no, 3 books? You should make 3. Mark Ordersky, I think he's the guy who starts the appendices with a full head of hair, and by the end of it, he's completely bald. I really enjoy it a lot. I love that story.
It's a great story.
I remember, again, in the appendices, seeing footage of Peter Jackson with like a miniature of Helm's Deep, I think. And this is in 1996, 1997, during these 2 years where they're just doing all this special effect prop work, and he's there like almost like Warhammer, like the ultimate Warhammer. Like, this is where the arrows would fire down. And it just looks so much fun.
Can you imagine having to pack all that up if it didn't work?
Yeah.
No, guys, it's not going to work.
I can't imagine the stress of that meeting. 20 minutes. So we want $20 million now.
And to finance.
yeah. And then lots more money on top.
Wow. Well, it's mad, isn't it? Can you imagine just these films not existing?
I know. It sounds... or
crazy.
Maybe even worse. A rubbish movie.
A rubbish one film.
A rubbish
Brett
one
Ratner's
film.
Lord of the Rings.
But it did get made, and we have just watched the theatrical cut, The Fellowship of the Ring from 2001. We're not going to do a synopsis, as we said at the beginning, probably because I think we've all seen this film various amounts of times. You probably the least amount of times, Dave.
I've seen it a lot of times.
I've seen it probably 25 times.
Yeah, I haven't seen it that many times.
Either.
So we're going to talk through it sort of chronologically. And I've broken it down into, I guess you could call them acts, but sort of like segments. So I want to start with the Shire at the beginning.
Are you not going to start with the synopsis at the beginning? You know, the sort of the setting of the scene.
Galadriel's.
I guess we could do.
I not really. But I did want to tell a stupid. This is about me being a stupid boy, and it was. I've told this story before, but not on this podcast. Where I went to see.
Did you think it was broken?
No,
it's dark for a long time at the beginning.
No, it's worse than that. More embarrassing than that. I went to see something at the cinema with some friends, and that's something we'd missed the showing or whatever. So we ended up seeing The Fellowship of the Ring. I didn't know anything about Lord of the Rings. I just knew it was some books. And so we went in kind of by accident, and we sat down, and we were all like 15 or 16-year-old boys. There was like 4 of us. And obviously it starts with this very kind of serious monologue. And Galadriel says, what does she say?
She says lots of
I feel it in the water.
Yes.
I feel it in the earth.
She said.
I smell it in the air.
And I said, sorry, out loud in the cinema to a titter of laughter. And then...
Was this in Yeovil?
Yes, it was in Yeovil. But then...
I bet they loved it.
My point was that immediately then became completely engrossed. I was like, sort of not taking it seriously, said my stupid joke, got a little laugh, and then was just like engrossed in the movie.
If I'd been in your... I would have been so angry with you.
You would have laughed. You would, because you would have been about my age. You would have been younger. You would have gone, that was a cool guy.
No, I'd have been 5 years older than you.
Everyone thought I was amazing.
Desperate to watch this
But
film.
I became very engrossed in the movie, and then was gutted because I had no idea that it was a trilogy. So
I was hated you even more.
I was ready. I
remember
so
being
ready
at the cinema, and the end comes up. You just hear that rustle of what from all the idiots who've gone in there not knowing what it is.
Why do you have to know everything? Why do you have to know about a thing before you see it? It was great. It was amazing.
People blinded, not knowing what they're doing.
I think what you are. I'll tell you what you are. You're jealous of my
I thought you were going to call
experience.
him a gatekeeper.
No, a little bit like that as well. But no, you're jealous because then I was like, oh my God, this is great. I love this. There's 2 more movies. I can't wait. I loved it.
Dave wanted the Harvey Weinstein's single Lord of the Rings experience.
Yes. No, I didn't. That's what I thought I was getting, but I love the trilogy. And I do think that opening section is amazing at just... And I could experience it because I hadn't read the books, I didn't know anything about them, and I understood what was going on right away. It's really, really good and quick and shows you so much of Middle-earth and about Middle-earth that you kind of get the factions, you get the evil, you get the ring, you get
I think this is one of the best things about Lord of the Rings. It is very simple.
Yeah.
It's just...
It is.
He's drawing all evil to him. It's just an evil guy. He wants all the evil things. The most evil thing is a ring that he's made. He wants it. And there are some good guys trying to stop him.
And it's very, I think it's quite stylized as well, this opening. I love them showing the different factions with the rings. I love the men stood in that kind of triangle formation, all looking awful and haggard and old. And
that's really important, that bit, even though it's really, because it's really early on. And as a little bit of context, maybe, Rob, you've got that as well, but growing up, desperate for representation, this is what middle-class white people want. Some representation for fantasy, for for this genre, which it was obviously huge now, and like in the 80s had a moment, but just getting it right is important. I remember playing World of Warcraft, just Warcraft on PC when I was a kid in the 90s, and just their orcs are just right. They're just the correct orcs, and just thinking, this really gets it. And it's because it's kind of based on Games Workshop, which is kind of based on illustrations of from Lord of the Rings and other offshoots. But there are bits that just, and there was I had just a radar for it when I was that age, when I was a kid. It's like, this either gets it or no, it's out of bounds. And this was just and tons of reasons maybe we'll get into, but just about the people that they had got in to do the visualizations and the concept art for them, but immediately just kind of going, those are dwarves. Yeah, excellent. I'm in good hands.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, Rob. The Shire. I just wanted to make that point. I think it's good.
No,
I
agree.
Does a
I
good
think
job.
you're right to start on that. And that immediately you're seeing what had been to me then the most incredibly epic battle shot I've ever seen in any film. All the orcs just falling off that cliff, and the camera just swooping down, them all charging. Hugo Weaving as Elrond, just giving his commands, all the arrows flying out. There's that bit where all the swords just all come up.
Why would that happen? But it's cool.
Great. In the game, in the Two Towers game, that is where the movie transitions into the game. As the swords are swinging, it transitions seamlessly from movie to game, and you're just controlling one of the people in that fight. My God, it's good.
I saw something on TikTok the other day, which was... it was the scene from the Fellowship of the Ring. It was in the Council of Elrond, and it was, can you see where it transitions into the game? And it's different characters are standing up, and I think Boromir stands up and he just goes into PS2 visuals. It's so good.
Well, this bit was genuinely great in the game. The Shire. The Shire. When I was watching this, I was honestly struggling to not cry.
Yeah,
same.
Flipping heck! It's
the music.
It's the music.
The music. It's everything about it. It's just where I want to live. It's in New Zealand, but it looks so English. It looks so English countryside. Everything around it. It's just the quintessential fantasy of. I mean, the Shire has been ripped off now, I think, so much in fantasy literature since the Lord of the Rings was written. Every fantasy adventure starts in an idyllic, leafy little the two rivers, and everyone who lives there has heard tales of these evil, dark events that have happened thousands of years in the past. But we don't talk about that. We don't need to worry about that here in the two rivers in the Shire. Everyone's just farming and drinking ale and smoking pipe weed and
dancing,
just having a really nice, authentic, down-to-earth time.
I'm drinking some ale out of a wooden cup.
Yeah, that's the dream.
And Gandalf loves it's just everything about this scene is perfect. And it was really interesting watching the theatrical version again because it's tighter and it's better. In the extended version, it's framed by Bilbo, and Ian Holm narrates over himself writing about hobbits. So he's explaining about hobbits. But here it's the classic example of show, don't tell. Gandalf, we're looking through Gandalf's eyes at the Shire, really. We're just seeing the hobbits act. And Gandalf is like the anchor, I guess, for the audience in this instance where he's the outsider. He is familiar with it, but, we're seeing what the hobbits are like rather than just having Ian Holm tell us what the hobbits are like.
Yeah.
They're mistrusting of outsiders, but still hearty enough. The fireworks, but I just love it so much. Where he lets the fireworks out, all the kids are happy.
I was going to say, was there a more iconic extra than that guy?
That guy is amazing.
He's unbelievable.
The scowling.
Yeah, his laugh to scowl is it's peak cinema. It's one of the most incredible scenes.
The music there as well. Just the music just pauses for a little bit.
Yeah.
and then kicks in again. Wonderful.
So, Concerning Hobbits by Howard Shore, right? And it's as I listen to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack sometimes when I'm writing or just doing work or whatever, and that's always if it pops up on random, it's always the bit of music that just makes me stop and just feel.
Yeah, it's incredible. It toes that line between sort of jaunty and emotional. Like there's that warmth and love in it, and then but also that kind of jaunty.
Well, I guess later
comic.
on it has to also be about remembering being at that nice place. And no longer, so it's got this melancholy to it as well.
I think it's this scene or this sequence, Rob, is also amazing because it's also telling you about Gandalf in as much as these lovely, warm people like Gandalf too. Apart from the few who kind of are slightly distrustful of him, maybe or whatever. Mm-hmm. Most people really like him, and he's clearly a good character.
I mean, the fact that the worst thing they can say about someone is that they are a disturber of the peace.
Yeah, exactly. And Frodo clearly loves him, and it's just nice.
That shot of Frodo against that very first shot of just him, he's just reading,
just sat by a tree.
That's good.
Yeah,
that is good. Talking about, I guess you might be coming onto this anyway, Rob, but obviously a lot of people do talk about how the Lord of the Rings and the sort of wider foundations of it were influenced by Tolkien's experience of both world wars, really, especially the first, and about the sort of shadow of industrialization, and I'm sure we'll talk about all of that. But just as the idea that in this changing social kind of fabric of early 20th century Britain, the idea that places like the Shire would exist, or the versions of them where perhaps the politics of Middle Europe isn't very important to lads from a town in Shropshire or wherever this is kind of based, but the idea that there is a sort of a duty or certainly like a virtue in going and getting yourself involved in those sorts of things.
Yeah,
is that scene where Gandalf is explaining to Frodo what the ring is and what it means. And a little back and forth they have. I think Elijah was so good in this film.
I'll just hide it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I'll put it in a flower pot.
It cannot stay in the Shire. No, it can't.
Yeah.
And it's just his immediate resolve and what must I do? And he knows he's got to go.
The shot of
fantastic.
I'm sure you love this shot because you love every shot in the film. But there's that shot close up. Gandalf's face is most of the shot, and he hasn't touched the ring. It's where Bilbo left it on the floor.
Yeah,
and
he's just brooding.
Frodo comes in, and it's like leaving a little trap. It's like, here's your first packet of heroin, Mr. Frodo. And he picks it up, and he knows what he's done, and he's sad, but it's the only thing that he can do. And I think there's maybe more of that psychology up front in the film than there is in the book.
I think there's so much great large Gandalf face throughout the movie. I love that. I love him just sitting by the fire, smoking his pipe, just musing on what all this means, and his mind is starting to be concerned by it. I love when he comes back. I didn't, for the first time I realised that he says, keep it secret, keep it safe twice, which I didn't realise. He says on the way out, he's like, keep it secret, keep it safe. And then he comes back, it's like, he doesn't say keep it secret, he says, is it secret, is it safe? And I love when he puts the ring in the fire, and then obviously Frodo's looking at it, and then he's like, can you see anything? He's like, no. And he's the relief, the palpable relief.
That is the excellent Gandalf face.
It's so good. Sure. And then obviously, oh, hang on. It's like,
and his face falls.
His face falls. And it's just like, it's amazing. Ring. That's the moment in the film where it's like, this is happening now. This is it. We're off.
Were you going to talk about the time contraction?
Yeah, well, I think they were absolutely right to cut out that from the movie because why would you have it? Because in the book, I've been reading it recently, it's 17 years from when Bilbo leaves.
Okay, I didn't get that.
To when Gandalf finally learns enough. Because in this time, he's been out and he's had to hunt down Gollum and then lets him go. And that is when Mordor captures Gollum and torture him for the information. So that the Gandalf's biggest regret is that he lets Gollum go because he's like, that's not important at the moment. And he's basically trying to confirm that the ring Frodo now has is the one ring.
Yeah. He goes to the libraries in Gondor.
It takes him 17 years to do it. And he does go to the library. We see him go to the libraries in Gondor in the Fellowship of the Ring.
This is the first time I've seen it and gone, oh, it's Gondor.
Yeah, he goes to Gondor.
I always thought he was just in Isengard.
You see Gondor straight away in Fellowship of the Ring. Like, in 20 minutes into the Fellowship of the Ring, we're seeing Gondor already.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the the pros of being able to shoot these 3 films back to back is that they were filming scenes from Return of the King. I think one of the very first scenes Ian McKellen shot was the scene where they all leave at the end at the Grey Havens.
I had no idea.
One of his first films, one of the first scenes he ever filmed.
Wow.
So obviously they had like Gondor ready and everything. But yeah, in the book, 17 years, which is a nonsense, and it makes much more sense for the film version to condense it down and to make it feel like a week or so that you've been away.
Well, I was going to say, I basically agree. And there's like, but it's nice to exist in a world of the books. And I listened to the audiobooks last year. I haven't read them for a few years. And at the moment I've just finished and I'm now re-listening to the 1981 BBC radio adaptation. I mentioned it in a couple of other podcast episodes. And that also does retain some of that. And it is ridiculous. Like it does not very narratively compelling, but at the same time, it's nice to exist in a sort of fictional world where that isn't foremost in the author's mind. Like, I've got a drive plot. Like, that's not what he's thinking. He's thinking, I've got to conjure this world. And
I don't think he was ever really thinking anything beyond, I'm just going to write what I want to write, which there's a real sort of purity to it. There's a nice bit of poeticness about the fact that Frodo in the book leaves the Shire at the exact same age that Bilbo was when he left the Shire in The Hobbit, aged 50.
Right.
Which is like, that's still like fairly young for a Hobbit. So on Bilbo's 111th birthday, it's Frodo's 33rd birthday. They share the same birthday, which I don't think is mentioned in the film.
No.
So it's Frodo's 33rd birthday, and 33 is like the coming of age age for a Hobbit. I can't remember what else I was going to say then. But yeah, also just on the big faces, you were talking a lot about what Peter Jackson as just a director, visual staple would do in Bad Taste and Brain Dead. And there was just, I know it was the first time I noticed it for a while, just a lot of that. Sergio Leone does it a lot as well in his films, just really extreme close-ups on people's faces. Shots that start maybe with the head and shoulders, and then something dramatic happens and it'll zoom in and you'll get like the eyes at the top of the screen and the mouth. Sometimes it's just the eyes and the nose, just really getting in. And you've got this film that's a huge budget at the time, sweeping epic fantasy full of huge landscape shots, but then quite a lot of the film is spent really close in the faces of the characters. And I love how dirty everything is.
Yeah.
Everything's grimy and dirty.
His fingernails,
muddy fingernails, earth and worms and bugs and dirt and grass, and there's everything is so tangible. So there's the shot of the ring on the flagstone floor in Bag End. There's just like loads of crumbs and dirt and crap all around it. It's so good. It's so lived in.
I was going to say,
it's the antithesis of the over clean CGI-ness that you often get in films now, or even if it's not CGI, everything just looks really shiny and glossy and smooth all the time.
I love the shot of Bilbo opening his hand, turning it sideways, and the ring sort of reluctantly.
It's the weight of the ring.
It's the light of it on his hand. Like, I don't know if it's or maybe obviously it's probably intentional. Everything's intentional. It's a film. That's the way the light is on his hand, and as he tilts his hand moves from light into shadow, and that's just beautifully done.
I love it hitting the floor.
The ring
doesn't bounce or anything. Just. I don't know
how many times it took them to get that shot.
I don't know if this is if this is moving on, but I was just going to say about the close-ups made me think of Bree, and I won't get there yet if it's not time for Bree.
No, Bree is in the next bit.
Okay, then I'll leave it.
I'll just say, when I first ever time I've watched this, and therefore every other time really, it's kind of hung on with me. This is the least convinced I was ever about Lord of the Rings, was the Shire sections.
Yeah,
I think I've got like a real
sweet.
Yeah, I've got a low tolerance for kind of, the kids. Yay! Yeah. Like, I'm looking at every kid's face to see if they're breaking character. Like, don't you fucking break character. And just,
there is a little kid laughing when Bilbo's telling the story about the trolls. One of them in the back is just like
crazy old man.
And I think also the cartoonishness of Merry and Pippin, which is, I'm not precious about that because of the book. But it does, I guess, reveal the difference between, I guess one of the huge differences between the book and the film is the treatment of class, which just has to be different because I don't think it's as recognisable now, and maybe not explicable to non-British audiences either. But the relationship between Sam and Frodo. I think actually when you strip the class stuff out, what you get in the movie is just like his slightly slow friend is very loyal. Whereas it was an idea based on a class in terms of there being, I wouldn't want to put a name on it, but like a well-to-do house-owning gentleman or land-owning gentleman and his gardener, based, I think, what Tolkien has said on the relationship between officers and their batmen in the trenches. So, like I recently watched The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which is a movie by Powell and Pressburger, British filmmakers, and that is about the career of a military person. And the Scottish guy from Dad's Army is his Batman in like the war, and then becomes his kind of the head of his household, like his not butler, but like his his guy. And it's exactly that relationship. And it's the idea that these days we would never have like, oh yeah, I was your second in well, not even second, I was your underling during this period, so I'll just hang around doing that forever. The idea that some people, it's like class, like literally class, I'm a better class, that doesn't pervade now, so they've stripped that out. But what you do lose, I think the friendship of Sam and Frodo persists, and obviously is like a huge fan favorite. I think the film does it justice. Maybe Merry and Pippin, because they're one of them's Frodo's cousin, but they're basically also quite well to do hobbits.
They're very well to do. In Merry Doc Brandybuck, he's like in the book he before Frodo leaves the Shire, he has like he has to leave in secret, and Merry buys a house for him in Crick Hollow, another settlement further off to the east of the Shire, so that no one is suspicious when Frodo leaves the Shire. It's like, oh, he's just moved house. He's moved to this house in Crick Hollow, and Merry has secured this lovely little plot with a great view, and he's absolutely, Merry and Pippin are absolutely not the sort of comic relief characters that they are in the film.
The dynamic is that Frodo has contemporaries, and that they're all, I think they would be recognisable to British readers, especially at that time, as young men coming into the world. They're probably in a club in London. You know what I mean? And Sam is not of that world, and that's the dynamic of that group. And there's a big relief for Frodo when Merry and Pippin say, we know that you're actually leaving, like, and we've rumbled you, and he's kind of happy and not. And I think that a lot of those nuances are gone. Maybe that's fine. They're still in the book. I can still read the book. I did for the first time ever, having been listening to this rather longer radio adaptation, think, my God, they are speeding through the first kind of half of this film. I thought it was rapid. And maybe we should too, because we spent ages talking about the Shire.
He's talking about the Shire. So Gandalf finds out that the ring is bad. It's the one ring. It's the one bad ring. And then we get, so the next bit I want to talk about is from when they leave the Shire right up until they arrive at Rivendell. So it's the first travel-y bit. So we get Frodo travelling with Sam. We get their arrival in Bree after escaping from the Black Riders, their meeting of Aragorn, and then their subsequent battle with the Black Riders, and then the climactic. It's almost like a mini climax, isn't it, in the film when they finally reach Rivendell. Everything's going bad. The film really starts zipping along here, like there's constant back and forth between what Frodo and the hobbits are doing, what Gandalf is up to in Isengard, which is mostly just getting his ass kicked and sitting on a roof in the rain.
Spinning,
Elected to the way of pain.
That stuff's so good.
It is good.
I think that just to start that section, one of the first things that happens, so they run into Merry and Pippin in the field to replace all of the years of tinkering and buying a house and all of that. And me watching it first time ever, I was thinking, it's a bit, it's a bit slapstick comedy, I'm not sure. But then the scene with the Black Rider on the road, that was when I was like, fucking hell, like I'm so in. And nailed everything that I think is important.
You need that lightness for then the darkness, I think.
You can see that they're making decisions. How do we adapt this for the film? We're going to make Merry and Pippin these comic relief characters. We're going to introduce that in the party. They're going to steal the fireworks. Ha ha! It's funny. And I think I'm fine. I think it's fine. Like it doesn't like it doesn't bother me. I don't think they're not like complete idiots. They're not just there to crack jokes all the time. And by the end of the trilogy, they both have very important, serious, non-comic scenes. and things to do.
What I quite liked about that bit, well, it held true, I think, I mean, to these new characters, not obviously to the book, which I haven't read, but Frodo obviously quite seriously, he's like, we should get off the road, and then he's like, we should get off the road. When they first get under that root under the tree, like Merry and Pippin are still kind of like giggling,
Mushrooms, carrots.
And I love seeing that I love seeing the giggling fade as the Black Rider arrives.
Maybe that's what I enjoyed about it. Yeah, that's right.
That's right. It's serious, but you see it becoming serious rather than just Frodo says it's serious and suddenly they snap out of it and it's like, oh, it's serious. There's a transition which I think is important, and that kind of it gives a sense that, I mean, they can't even see what's above them. They just have this sense of terrifying evil.
So much is right about that scene. Not just, I think I had seen, I assume it's an Alan Lee picture, a bit of art of them underneath like a tree off a path, and it was such a perfect recreation of it that I think I would, it's funny, we talk about this now, like when something rings of authenticity and it appeals to fans. The only example coming into my head is Sonic the Hedgehog and his fucking teeth. But you know what I mean? Like something which gets, we talk about things like The Witcher or like adaptations. This was a thing which to me as a fan of this, hoping that it would be a particular way, the Ring Wraith and that whole, just the presentation of that scene said to me, oh, like again, shit, this is going to be brilliant.
I don't know even if it's a special effect. In my head, it might be more special than it actually is, but just the creepy crawlies coming out of the earth is so horrible.
Just desperate to get away from it.
Yeah, they're desperate to get away. Things we think of as unsettling, probably. Desperate to get away from this thing. And that's, I always think about the spider going on someone and just thinking, if that was me, I'd just stand up and I'd be killed. I would have stood up and be killed.
Like, I think, again, another thing from the appendices is that Peter Jackson is terrified of bugs.
Right.
But also has like a fascination, I think, with them. And there's lots of gross bug stuff in quite a lot of his films.
Yeah, definitely.
But I also I love the landscape stuff in this whole section. Again, it reminds me so much of just walking around Wiltshire, which I do quite a lot around the area I live. Just lots of, quite visually unappealing footpaths through overgrown fields, and there's just quite a lot of that here. Like it's not all, I mean, it is beautiful, but it's very green rolling hills. The road they're on is just, they're in this holloway. It looks really beautiful. There's that fantastic shot. I don't know what the effect is called. The Jaws shot where the perspective shifts.
They call it a vertigo shot.
A vertigo shot.
Hitchcock. Yeah.
I love it so much. I love how nature in that one moment transitions from something that's beautiful and that hobbits are very familiar with and comfortable with. They're in the Shire, and all of a sudden everything is very foreboding about it. Reminds me again quite a lot of, sometimes you just be out walking and you all of a sudden you just find yourself on your own in a forest, and you just get, for no apparent reason, just like a chill go down your spine for no real reason. You're like, whoa. Like, where am I? I feel quite unsettled all of a sudden. And if you ever find yourself unwittingly out after the sun has gone down, it starts getting dark, and everything that was maybe half an hour ago been quite beautiful. I went for a walk quite recently to Castle Combe to see the sunset from this place that I really like. The light going through the woods is amazing. But then I meant I had to walk home in the dark, basically. I was like, oh, maybe this was a bad idea after all. Everything that had half an hour ago been really beautiful and pleasurable was now just a challenge. Yeah. It was a challenge to navigate, and I just love how quickly it shifts. And
it's also like it's a story about with this memory of a generation of young men who'd had to leave home and go and do something that they really didn't want to do. And that Sam says moments before, it's that brilliant line, if I take one more step. And then suddenly it's a brilliant representation of how weak, how exposed they are. Like they're so small and they have this incredibly important thing.
Well, speaking of small, like that's what I love about Bree, is it's the first moment when you really get the sense of how small, I mean physically, but also like their kind of worldview, not worldview, but like their place in the world. I really like the little detail of the guardsman opening his little peephole, seeing that there's no one there, and then opening his lower peephole, suggesting that Bree is a place where hobbits do sort of come from time to time.
Trade, the Silk Road for hobbits.
But then that the inn, obviously, it's just fantastic. And inns feel, to me at least, like such a sort of staple and important part of fantasy. The fantasy world, well, not always welcoming, but like there's a warmth to them, and
you'll be surprised to know there's a very famous inn in the first town they reach in the Wheel of Time Day.
I can't believe it.
It's almost no.
And it's this mixture of the relief of being somewhere with people, but also the fear that they're very unsettled. And I love the way that they introduce all the characters in the inn with those big close-ups on their faces, horrible, haggard faces, drinking beer all over their
it's
beards.
Like being a short person at a gig.
Yeah, exactly. And the sort of mixed of reactions that they have, where I think Frodo and Sam are quite uneasy about it, and obviously Merry and Pippin are buying pints and having a great time. And of course we see Strider in the corner for the first time. Again, great brooding shot of a guy smoking a pipe in. I just think it's a fantastic bit of scene setting and bringing the hobbits like they're not in their world anymore.
Do you know, it's funny. I always used to really dislike when people from the Tolkien estate or Christopher Tolkien would say that the films are rough and inelegant, and I don't think they are those things. But it is again funny watching it now, and there has to be, I think, a simplicity to the scene where he's probably looking at it going, well, Merry and Pippin, these like characters my father crafted or whatever, and now they're talking about pints and they're making idiots themselves, and they do say too much in the inn, but the dynamics of it are so much finer. And I guess you have to lose something in order to make it work on screen. And I think in as much as it's consistent to their own version of these characters, but there is an element of clownishness again, isn't there? To the hobbits.
I think I also just really like the two members of the cast, the guy at the gate and the innkeeper, who are both like not mean to the hobbits, which I really appreciate, because I thought that would be...
Is it Barliman
Butterbur. Barliman Butterbur, who's owned the his family has owned the prancing pony for many generations.
In the books, he's got a young helper called Nob. We don't hear about Nob in the film.
Nob. There's also like I can't remember his name. There's a mean guy who's well known to the local.
Bill Furley.
Bill something, yeah. He just hangs around in the prancing pony all the time, and everyone's like, "Be careful of Bill."
Spy of Sauron.
He won't. A spy of Sauron.
He is a Saruman. He is actually a spy of
blimey.
Sauron. Yeah. No, sorry, I've spoiled the book for Rob.
My God.
It's all right. I've read it before.
Yeah,
I've read it before. I just can't remember all the tiny little details. But yeah, they meet Aragorn. They fool the Black Riders with some pillows,
and they fooled me as a cinema goer all those years ago. I didn't think they were dead, but I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a scary scene. The way that they are suddenly so quiet, and again, because you see that in the innkeeper terrified as he knows that they're in his inn and they're walking past, and he's huddled behind the bar or whatever with his nightcap on. I love that so much. And they silently enter that room and all agree, to like, we'll take one each. And they're going to stab them to death.
With
it's like
the bluntest sword you will ever see.
Very blunt.
Very blunt.
There's something so horrible about the particular mode of stabbing that they pick. They're sort of like, well, hold it, two hands. Okay, overhead. Everybody agreed? And then let's do it.
This is one of the scenes, justice for Ralph Bakshi and his animated versions. This is one of those scenes which isn't in the book. Not in exactly the same formulation, but appears almost visually identically in the animated version. It's one of the points where I think fans and Ralph Bakshi are kind of like, well, you could have given me some credit for that one, Mr. Jackson.
It's probably also something I could see it in another movie. I might be a little bit annoyed at this. It's it's a bit of a rubbish double cross by Peter Jackson in as much as we see someone go when they're stabbed, and it turns out they're just in a different place.
Oh, I've been having a terrible dream. We've missed two things I wanted to say. Just the visual brilliance of the shot of the ring landing on Frodo's finger in the...
Yeah.
And it's just he's brilliant, but also he's just got the right face. What a face. And when you think about now from this distance, all of the marketing, the number of times I saw that shot over the years, this movie was coming out and then it was being talked about. That was one of the key kind of marketing images that was seen over and over again. Brilliant shot. And also Sam bursting into the room and shouting, "I'll have you, Longshanks."
Yeah.
We can't not say
You
that.
have a stout heart. I think, the ring, I just love that in this movie there is a sense, you were told it, but you are shown it, the sense that the ring wants to be found. You know, the ring finds its way onto Frodo's finger there.
I'll stop spinning in the air now, and I'm just going to land on his finger.
I think that you get that sense. I don't think it's like an accident, or it's not like a stupid scene. It's like you really get the sense that the ring,
The film
has a will.
It does a great job of like, you can describe that and the ring goes up in the air and lands on his finger. And then the film has to show it. And it's like, whoop, whoop, hey, whoop.
Left a bit.
It's like, those TikToks where you get someone kicking an impossible football shot in the goal, and then it just transitions to a comedy guy in a green morph suit with the football carrying it into the goal. I almost imagine just a green screen guy putting it on his finger.
And of course we get to see, I don't know what it's called, the world, that sort of different view that Frodo has when he's wearing
the
the ring.
Wraith world.
The Wraith world, of course it is.
Yes,
which
Sauron can see him.
Yes.
I see you.
Yeah. Is that the moment where his view kind of rushes towards the Tower of Sauron?
Barad-dûr. And Sauron says to him, "There is no life in the void, only death." Just as a random evil line before he manages to wrench the ring back
Take the
off
ring
his
off, I
finger.
think. Yeah.
I wonder if Bilbo was like, every time he's putting the ring on and just laughing. Ha ha ha.
Who is this guy?
I guess
The Limmy meme where he's like, he wakes up in the middle of just his face.
Yeah.
And there's the caption, Bilbo puts the ring on at 3 a.m. Sauron.
Yeah. Now?
For God's sake.
Yeah. Where are you horrible little
I
man?
think it's because Sauron's getting more and more powerful. I think that's the reason that it's happening now.
We're taking a long time.
I can't believe it. I can't believe we've ended up taking a long time over
What have
this.
we done?
Aragorn gets them to Weathertop, another iconic scene. Interestingly, I think this was the first scene that Viggo Mortensen shot as Aragorn.
Right.
And he had been rushed in to replace Stuart Townsend, who'd originally been cast as Aragorn. They gloss over this a little bit in the appendices, but I think basically Peter Jackson was unconvinced by him, and a couple of weeks into shooting was just like, nah.
Yeah. I think
You're fired.
Too young was the
Too young was what they said. And so they get in Viggo Mortensen very last minute. And he's had very little time to prepare, and he's just flown into New Zealand and immediately has to do this big fight scene against like 5 ring wraiths at the top of Weathertop, which I think sort of like probably the perfect thing for him to do really on his first day. You don't have to worry about dialogue, just have a fight.
Yeah.
Just have a big
Burn
old
some
sweaty
people.
fight.
Yeah. Throw a flaming torch into a ring wraith's face.
I don't really understand the physics of how that torch gets stuck in there.
Doesn't matter.
But
that was,
who cares?
I saw that. I'd almost forgotten it, and it's the last thing you see. It's like in the overhead shot, and it's just sticking out like a Dalek.
Yeah.
It's great.
I do love it. I love how, again, it's Merry and Pippin and Sam's at it. Like the naive foolishness of just, they're still the hobbits, they're still cooking bacon and tomatoes and mushrooms in a frying pan.
Yeah.
Wherever we go, nice crispy bacon, Mr. Frodo, want some tomatoes?
Yeah.
It's a little line that I missed before, and I think Pippin, it's like, he says something about, my tomato's fallen on the floor, something like that. Whilst the ring race is slowly coming.
Maybe a step too far.
That shot of the ring race in the mist,
Oh, it's so good.
S level, just so
Yeah.
good, brilliant. And obviously, like, New Zealand looks incredible throughout all of this. I think Weathertop is the first. I don't know how to describe it. There's certain sort of locations you only really find in fantasy. It's one of the things that Dark Souls does so well. The Witcher 3 is really good at it as well. And it's just there's a drama to that location.
Yes.
And it's like, there are, like, I obviously don't believe in ley lines. I'm not a fool, but the idea that some places just have something to them, a power to them. Yeah, I loved it. What a place to have. Wherever they found was perfect.
Yeah, the ancient watchtower of Amun-Sul.
Exactly. Yeah, smashed up by Sauron's forces.
Yeah.
A small
Second
detail
age.
just in this scene that I really love is the way that the blade disintegrates in Aragorn's hand, and he throws it away. The whole with the blade that stabs Frodo. I can't remember what it's called. You just said
Morgul
it.
blade.
Yeah.
Well, it just means that it's
From Mordor.
Morgul just
Morgul.
means bad.
Right.
Yeah, Morgul's just another bad place.
It's so great that the sense that it's a properly evil weapon that's just done something horrible to Frodo. The way it turns to dust, and Aragorn's disgusted by holding it. I just
He's
love that.
really good, isn't he, Elijah Wood, at getting stabbed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just constantly. It's really good.
He is. And I'm really good at.
I think every movie he gets a bit where he has to get stabbed by something.
Yeah,
We'll get
I'm
on
thinking
to-
of Shelob. Yeah, that bit's
Can
great.
you make
Right.
loads of saliva come out of your mouth? Yes, I can.
Don't worry, I've got you, Peter. One of the things, just before we move on, about the stuff that's missing from the beginning, I don't miss Tom Bombadil. I don't think anyone who says they miss Tom Bombadil really misses Tom Bombadil.
They just want to show that they know there's a character called Tom Bombadil
I've
there.
read the book. But what I do miss a little bit is when you have more time to tell this bit of the story. So they go through Farmer Maggot's fields, and Frodo says he's terrified because as a young hobbit, he used to steal mushrooms, and several times Farmer Maggot beat him. And the last time he says he showed me to his dogs and told them that if they caught me again, they could eat me. So he's very scared of Farmer Maggot. And then
Is Farmer Maggot a hobbit?
I believe he must be. I don't know why I think that.
I also
it's just
think
a
he is. I
man
don't know
beating a hobbit. It's a different image as well. But then, do they have hobbit-sized dogs?
Well, I
Are they-
saw that in this movie as well. I was slightly annoyed by a hobbit-sized dog in this movie.
Let's not think about
Let's
it.
not worry about it. Let's not worry about it.
But the really nice thing is that they meet him. Farmer Maggot responds to them all as adults, and I love the idea that in the world know people who responded to me differently when I was a kid, and then when you meet them as an adult, it's like you've been let into like this secret
Right.
circle. But more than that, there's this lovely scene where Frodo says the Farmer Maggot helps them and gives them, as a kind of an ironic touch, to go on their way some rations, and they are mushrooms, and it's kind of like this nice. He helps them even though he knows they're in trouble, and he doesn't know what kind of trouble, and then he's seen a black rider and he helps them. And Frodo says, you might not believe this, I've been terrified of you for 30 years, and my biggest regret is that I've missed having a really good friend. And it's like unusually nice, and what I think you miss is the people who, and the value of just people who are hospitable and like this help that people give on the way. And like Rivendell, which we're coming to in a sec, hopefully in another 20 minutes, it's called The Last Homely House. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
And it's the idea that when you're on the road, there are these, the having a safe place to stay is like this huge deal. It's one of those things which is just lost a little bit, which it struck me in my listening to the radio is quite important. And Tom Bombadil's got a bit of that as well, him and his fucking boots.
Well, I don't know. So I only know Tom Bombadil from The Rings of Power Season 2, which neither of you have seen yet. So I don't know what role Tom Bombadil plays in the Lord of the Rings.
So it's a slightly episodic at the beginning of Lord of the Rings. They go to a Barrow White, and there's like a undead guy in there, and then a little bit later they're by a river and a tree basically swallows one of them, and then Tom Bombadil comes along, and I think he just tells the tree off. And the idea is he exists slightly out of the rest of the sort of power hierarchy of the world, which is why he's not included in a lot of adaptations. I think he does, and the ring doesn't have any.
Well, he like grabs the ring, he tosses it like a coin, and he just laughs about it.
Right.
Like, I'm surprised there isn't a whole prologue trilogy about Tom Bombadil and why he's not affected by the ring. That's what they'd usually do nowadays, isn't it?
Well, maybe that's what Rings of Power
Maybe
is,
that's what it will be.
kind of about.
But
Like I said, he is in Season 2.
The idea being that I don't think Tolkien really had like a rational explanation. He was
Right.
just a character he liked who'd been in some of his rhymes, and he put him in this world, and he didn't really make
A lot of
sense.
Tom Bombadil's lines are given to Treebeard in the Two Towers film.
Oh, really? Is he
Only
like?
in an extended scene.
Is he like Obi-Wan's ghost? He just can sort of turn up from time to time and maybe do a little bit of exposition, or
It's kind of crazy than that. It's more like he's an idea. So lots of the kind of influencing ideas about the Lord of the Rings have got to do with kind of epic poetry and Germanic, Old English, and sort of a European folk tale. And it was like very deliberate attempt to incorporate and encode a kind of an English folklore or folk tale.
Right.
And he is just a kind of mythic figure who is put in with the rest of, it's just jumbled up a little bit and doesn't quite fit as well as a Barrow White or the ideas of wraiths or stories about people going on long journeys. He's like is he oldest? Is that what he's called? He's basically been there for he's like this timeless being.
Yeah, well, he's in Rings of Power season 2, which is obviously
a long time ago,
thousands and thousands of years in the past. So yeah, and he looks well.
Yeah,
Nathan, I'm worried. Rob seems to have picked up.
He's just reading
book.
The Hobbit.
He's reading The Hobbit.
Well, look, we're about to get to Rivendell, but we should mention Arwen. We get introduced to Arwen here.
People are mad that it's Arwen.
The first elf.
What do you mean?
It's a different elf,
right? Okay.
But Arwen is
Glorfindel.
barely in the books at all.
Right.
Arwen.
Why would you need women in your book?
She's mostly mentioned in the appendices.
Right.
Like there is very little of anything at all in the books of Arwen. But I've been reading The Hobbit to my daughter, and what really struck me was the depiction, Tolkien's depiction of the elves in The Hobbit versus where we've got to with the elves in the Lord of the Rings movies. They are very serious, amazing beings. Like the first time we see an elf is just the light that pours out of Arwen and Frodo with been stabbed. It's so bright.
They have a grace.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's like an incredible grace and elegance to them. A very sort of like deep, slow voice. They all speak like
I'm
that.
actually at a different frame rate to you.
I'm the faster rider. I will go. And then obviously Arwen does that amazing bit where she summons the water, and the horses on the waves sweep away the Black Riders, which is fantastic.
It is great.
I still remember that shot of the horses converging and her white horse being in
Oh,
front.
it's amazing. I had that poster in my room.
It was unbelievable
Arwen
shot.
with her sword up and the Black Riders on the other side. Also just one of the best lines, isn't it? If you want him, come and claim him. Give up the halflings, yes.
Fancy version of "Come and have a go if you think you're hard."
Yes. Instead of this, say this cool thing instead. But in The Hobbit, and I was laughing as I was reading this, every time there gets to a song in The Hobbit, I have to try and do the song for my daughter.
The songs
naturally.
are a problem.
There's a lot of songs in it,
Right.
and they've just escaped from the trolls in the Hobbit. Bilbo and Gandalf and the dwarves are all very tired. They've been journeying for days. They're desperately looking for Rivendell because it's hidden in the valley before they get to the Misty Mountains. And finally, they find it, but they hear the elves first. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then, there came a burst of song, like laughter in the trees. And here comes the song. Oh, what are you doing and where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing, the river is a-flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-la-lay, here down in the valley. And it goes on like that for another 3 verses.
Oh, God.
They're just incredibly la-la-la-la-la.
Daddy, I don't want any more story.
The elves are saying, after they finish their song, well, well, said a voice, just look. Bilbo the Hobbit on a pony, my dear. Isn't it delicious? Most astonishing, wonderful, says another elf.
Blimey.
And they just carry on like that.
Yeah.
They're just very happy.
Whimsical.
The Fey folk.
And then it describes, where does it describe? It describes Bilbo loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves, like Thorin and his friends, think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. Obviously, The Hobbit is a children's book. I think Tolkien was writing it for his kids. So, It's that classic thing where if you read the first Harry Potter book, it says that Albus Dumbledore is like the supreme mugwump and all this kind of nonsense. And then by book 7, that's canonized, and it has to be like actually put in their seal. He's the supreme mugwump.
I wish I hadn't said that.
They're talking about the songs in the radio adaptation, which I will also say the radio adaptation is, it's like it obviously had. I think that Jackson had. It was his first time. I think he'd seen the film and then he listened to the adaptation anyway. But it does have a relationship with the movies, and Ian Holm plays Frodo, and then obviously plays Bilbo in the films. And I don't think that's any kind of accident at all. Bill Nighy plays Sam. Sam's like the main character in like books 2 and 3 in the radio adaptation.
Legend.
Has a massive part to play. The songs, they do sing some of the songs, and a couple of them are pretty good, and they kind of you just need them to be like, why would someone actually sing this song?
Right.
But I know that they didn't have long to record the BBC radio adaptation. I don't think it was like a huge budget, and there is every now and again you get a sense of it being a little bit rushed. And when all the hobbits are walking to Crick Hollow, is that
Crick Hollow? Yes.
They all kind of come out the door and they're like, "Oh, should we sing a song then?" And you just get a real sense of just 4 guys going, "Okay, well, we're gonna have to sing this bloody song, aren't we?" And it's Upon the Hearth, and they just it's so awkward. Upon the, and Ian Holmes starts, "Yes, that's good. Let's sing that one." I might put a bit of it at the end of this podcast.
If we're going to talk about Ian Holm, we in Rivendell. Because that bit shit me up when I first saw it, and I always kind of look forward to it every time now that I watch the movie, because it's just
I went and reread it recently. Have you got to that bit
No, I've
yet?
not got to that bit yet. I was so scared by it that when Boromir at the end of the film starts trying to take the ring, I remember in the cinema being, "Oh no, Boromir's going to do a scary snarly face. Please don't, Boromir."
I was going to say, look, the interesting thing in the book, if you read it, is that, like everything in the book, it's slower and slightly different. And there is a suggestion that it might be Frodo is just thinking that because he is more and more attached to the ring.
Right.
So when someone says, "Could I have a look at my ring?"
Right.
It's maybe
there's a distrust.
Perception.
You want this, don't you?
But it's a brilliant moment.
It's a great moment. It's so good. Yeah, just
of course
enough.
you can do the sound.
Yeah.
Of course you can.
Yes, exactly. I love how sorry he is afterwards. He does a lot of good sorries.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't talk about him just failing to leave the ring about 4 times. Bilbo.
That does happen.
So
in the book.
good. Ian Holm and Ian McKellen together is so
The
good.
Ians. The Ians.
Yeah.
Ian's
It's so good. He's so dramatic, Ian Holm, in that. He's his little fists. You want it for yourself.
Yeah. We've actually skipped a little bit, and it's my fault, but in getting to Rivendell, the bit that I think we all did a little chuckle at, it's maybe one of the worst bits in the movie.
Elrond's big face.
Elrond's big face. It's as Frodo slips. As Frodo slips away, the screen goes bright, and there's some terrible masking of people as they sort of slip across the screen.
He's got that in him. Did you guys see the music video for the Beatles track? I actually really love that beat. That Beatles track's been necromanced by AI.
It's incredible. The John Lennon lost kind of song.
And I kind of, you know what I mean? It's something that shouldn't exist. Part of me wants to stamp on it, but also I'm like, it's quite catchy.
It's a great song.
And the music video that Peter Jackson put together is awful. And it's like this Elrond scene set to a Beatles track that should never have existed, and it lasts for 4 minutes. It's confounding.
I did think throughout the movie that there are some quite cheesy choices, and like sometimes like just not great. There's so much slow motion, and
I think we're getting on to. I've got some questions at the end.
Okay.
I think we're veering into, but we should talk about. Well, the Council of Elrond, but also Rivendell itself, which I think probably of all the locations across the movie is the one that has the most special effects dedicated to it.
Yeah.
But I still thought it looked amazing. I thought this place looked absolutely great. There's so many scenes where Sam and Frodo were talking to each other just in the background, just endless, beautiful waterfalls cascading down. It just looks... It looks like what all fantasy open world video games aspire to. This is what they want when they've got their dialogue scenes, and they want their backgrounds to look as good as Rivendell does. Like, I just don't think it's aged. I think it looks amazing. Like, it's got real elements to it, just embellished with fantasy effects.
It does look great, and there's a sense I kind of always struggled with a little bit of it just being so safe.
Yes,
it's like, surely the elves could just stay there forever. I can't see any evil ever getting there.
I was going to say, this is one of the things about Lord of the Rings. It is a simple story, like Rob said at the beginning, and I think one of the things which has given it such life, and we are a fandom-based podcast, and things for people to talk about endlessly. There are people online who, a little bit like us today even, are like, well, I've read this bit, and in this bit it makes this clear, and this is really interesting. And there is also this very basic mask, like this layer on top of Lord of the Rings. There is this story of good and evil, and there's all these people, and you can sort of view them as mortal. Or there's this history of Middle Earth, and you're like, when I was a kid, I used to read Lord of the Rings. I used to be like, what is Numenor? Right. What are you all talking about?
Yeah.
Or the idea that the wise ones, that the wizards are from a different order of beings who've been sent here for a specific reason. And then behind Rivendell, this idea, which answers your question, why can't they just stay there, that the power of elves is failing. And it's such a weird thing to just have chucked into, like, why? What do you mean, why? And I don't really still understand why. I know that it is, and that they're gradually retreating from the world. Has it got something to do with the tree, Rob?
Have you read the Silmarillion?
No, I never have.
I think it's in there. I've not read it for probably 20 years, so my knowledge on this is hazy. But all of the elves are leaving. Like, most of the elves have gone. In the extended edition, very soon after Sam and Frodo leave Hobbiton, they witness like a group of elves,
a train,
leaving. They're just on their way to the Grey Havens.
They're singing about how delicious the hobbits look.
I don't know why, but it makes me feel sad, says Sam upon witnessing this. And it's visually, it's autumn in Rivendell. It's the fall, and the leaves are falling from the trees. And I think that sort of represents the gradually falling power of the elves in Middle Earth.
On a mythic level, the way I always understood it was that Tolkien's writing about a folk history of Britain, and it's like this codification of the fact that fairies and fae folk used to exist and be sort of a part of lots of sort of common stories, and now obviously don't exist in our modern, the magic-less world doesn't include those things. And it's the Third Age is the coming of the king throughout this kind of cycle, is the beginning of the age of men. That's the whole deal, and that's the age that we live in. So the idea that these kind of order of beings have left our world.
Yeah, I kind of always associated it with like a failing belief in the past and magic, and which is obviously kind of a bit ridiculous when, like all the characters in this movie are completely accept that elves exist and are real. I don't really mean a belief in elves, but
they
more
will
just
pass,
kind of,
as Galadriel says, they will pass into not knowing.
Mechanization coming over magic.
Yeah. Yes. And we did, obviously Gandalf is back now, and we have kind of skipped a little bit. Another amazing scene that I loved when the first time I saw it was Gandalf obviously whispering to a moth. It's so good. The moth's little furry, I don't know, it sort of moves in a way like it's listening. How do they get a moth to do that? Does a moth just do that?
And then he put you up here?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
So you want me to get an eagle? Okay. Well.
Yes.
It's so good. And then obviously just jumping off the...
That's Radagast Erasure, by the way. Radagast was originally the one who sent the eagle to check.
So the moth goes to Radagast. Radagast gets the eagle.
Gandalf meets Radagast on while he's out and about, and Radagast says, "Been looking for you. Saruman really wants to see you. It's really important." And then he goes there, and Saruman's like,
"Surprise!
I am Saruman of many colours, and you have to live on my roof." And then the emissary that Radagast was going to send anyway comes and he says, Gandalf, I see you're living on the roof.
Yeah.
What's going on?
I don't like it up here.
then he
Help
escapes.
me. Yeah, that's a great bit.
It is.
It does explain why the eagles can't carry the hobbits to Mordor, which everyone always bangs on about. Gandalf says, look, can you give me a baccy? And he says, the Lord, what's his name? Begins with a G. I can't remember. The Lord of the Eagles, anyway, says, I can for a bit because I was sent here to bear news, not a man, or something like that. So you can't actually carry him very far.
Fair play. I think the Eagles have their own agenda. They're like, well, we're not doing everything.
I've got to catch some rabbits.
Yeah, I'm not taking you all the way to Mordor.
I've got loads
Smoky
to
over
do.
there.
They're
Horrible.
proud creatures.
Yeah.
They're not for riding.
No.
You wouldn't have to ride them though. You would just give one of them the ring, wouldn't you, in a little pouch?
That's true. But then it
Yeah.
would corrupt
Attached to it.
him.
It would
Rob.
corrupt the eagle.
And then you would have a giant eagle.
Just an evil eagle.
Yeah. Instead of a Dark Lord, you would have a bird.
We should talk about the Council of Elrond.
Yeah. It's
Where
so
we-
good.
So we're like halfway through the film here, and it's like finally we meet the Fellowship of the
Yes.
The lads.
Ring. And I guess it's quite difficult structurally because typically by this stage in a movie you've introduced all your principal cast, you know the thing, and all of a sudden it's like the movie begins again. There's like another start to the film. I think it handles it pretty well.
Yeah.
Just very quickly we've got to establish who the important people are here. We've got to establish an elf, a dwarf, another man.
It is funny though that it's just Elrond like announcing them as if they're coming on stage.
Yeah.
And from the dwarves, Gimli son of
Gimli,
Glorm.
son of Gloim.
And two unnamed dwarfs. I think good to see you guys.
I've forgotten how good Sean Bean is in this film.
He's fantastic.
Amazing in it. And the first, I love that he picks up the shards of Narsil and it cuts him and he drops it on the floor and Aragorn's just looking at him like, no, I'm watching
Idiot.
Just a fantastic little bit of scene. Immediately we're slightly distrustful of Boromir, just straight away.
But also the tension between those two
Yes.
characters, and he's obviously made himself look a little bit of a fool in front of Aragorn. It's great.
He's slightly more foolish than he is in the books, but I do think that I think Sean Bean's brilliant, and I think that scene is a shorthand for loads of the struggle that Boromir must be going through. And you do get the sense as well, the more that you kind of become familiar with the story, that the guys in Gondor have been at war with Mordor for forever. And it's like, there is a problem, actually. You're right, we should do something about it. And maybe you could help us out. And you found a massive weapon. Yeah, well, maybe I'd like the weapon. Maybe I deserve the weapon.
Yeah.
So that's all he's thinking.
Yeah. But not a king. We don't need a king, by the way. We're fine. We've got a steward.
My dad.
Yeah. He's fine. We're cool with it.
I don't blame Boromir at all. I think he's a great character.
He's a brilliant character.
Fantastic.
It's a different line from the old line of Numenor. So the stewards are from a noble line, but a slightly lesser one. And again, it kind of goes, I guess, what we had a letter about this because a while ago I said that that Tolkien was wedded to ideas of like great men doing great things. And someone said, yeah, but the whole point that someone wrote into us and said the whole point is that the hobbits are the show, and that very deliberately meant to show that the smallest creature can have the biggest impact, which is also true. But I would say, just on the subject of Boromir, I'm going to be talking loads about Boromir. I love Boromir. That there is also inherent in it this old idea of that kings and the myth of kings and of leaders is really important. The idea that they are, again, it's like a class idea, that they're and almost a religious idea that kings stand above normal men and have a particular right to rule, which is bound up with religiosity. And the line of kings that came from Numenor and then became the line of kings of men in Middle Earth, and they go like Isildur, and that line is then. It is a symbolic of the fall of man and the failure of man to deal with the ring, that then that line is dispersed and they become rangers. And there's a second noble line. So I guess it's the idea of like you have royal lines and noble lines, and the noble line is the line of stewards. So they're great men, but they're good men. They're like 7 out of 10 men.
Yeah.
And they're not quite as tall. But the idea of the rangers, they live for ages and they're really tall. And the idea is that as the blood of Numenor becomes lessened and diminishes, the men are literally getting shorter.
Right.
So that idea is in Tolkien's books. But then also, I like that whoever wrote in, well, absolutely right. The hobbits are also showed that regular people and the resilience of regular people. And that's the thing. They're not doing, well, they are doing great things, but they're not, fighting 20 orcs at once or whatever. They're just doing what they can. And it is very, but then, embedded in that is a classist idea or a class idea that, we're all hobbits.
Yeah.
We're not great men of history, but we can still play a part, even if it's just getting munched up by machine guns.
Yeah, that's true.
So I do like Boromir. I would say on your point, Rob, about Sean Bean, I think he's so good that he kind of tanks Faramir, who is supposed to be a slightly better version of Boromir in the books. He's slightly more noble. He makes a better choice. Obviously, we're getting ahead of ourselves. And I just don't think there's any competing with Sean Bean in the movies.
Don't care. Boromir is the best.
He is the best.
Yeah. I apparently read that a lot of that a lot of his lines, a lot of his dialogue in the Council of Elrond was written the night before.
Yes, I've seen him tell this story.
Right, it was actually I don't know. I haven't seen all of it, but they did during COVID. They did a big. I don't know what it would have been. 20th anniversary of the Fellowship.
One Zoom.
And they told the story of it being written the night before and him having the words on his knee during that scene, which is why he's occasionally looking down like it's a gift. But it's so good. It's great, and I just love everything about it. I love the way he keeps getting up to speak. I love it. I can stand up and say some stuff now. It's just such a good counsel. It's the best.
Is Isildur's heir.
I think my favourite thing on that meeting has always been Gimli. How can we characterise Gimli? And it's just, he does the stupidest dwarf thing.
I know what to do.
I'll just smash it.
What are we waiting for?
I decided not to be annoyed, but I was annoyed that he smashed his axe and then later just has a new axe. But I decided his mate just gave him his axe.
There's a huge forge in Rivendell. He'd have probably just gone to the elven smiths.
Yeah.
In the, 6 months between the end of the Council of Elrond and when they actually leave. They just, I don't know, that's the lie.
Singing, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, singing around.
Having said it was like they're on stage and they're all being introduced. There are lots of different, slightly nuanced reasons that everyone is in the House of Elrond. And it makes it seem in the film like they're all actually just there to chat about the ring. Which is, again, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine, but it's like you lose that bit of story about Gondor and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. I've never really questioned why particular people are there or, obviously I think we get a sense of Boromir and why he's there, but, Gimli and Legolas, and especially in Rivendell where there are loads of elves around. Why is Legolas in particular?
I do enjoy how they've called everyone there, representatives from each of the races of Middle-earth, to discuss this threat that, threatens them all. And really, Elrond's just like, okay, you have one choice.
Yeah.
I've called you all here to say you have one choice, really. You've got to do this. And then all the arguing ensues. Like Boromir, I think he makes a pretty good point. He's like, you mentioned the point, Nath, about how, his people are dying. They're fighting Mordor.
It's true.
Well, why am I here if not to share my opinion? My opinion is let's use the ring to fight Sauron.
But it's an ill-informed opinion. That's the problem. It can't be used against him, Boromir. That's what he doesn't accept. It's actually the first time, this is maybe embarrassing, but the first time that I really, really followed that there's a scene where Sam and Frodo are like, let's go home. And Frodo's
we're out.
Yeah, let's go home. And it's like decided.
Because in the back of your head, they're going on the long journey.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't think I appreciated it until this watch where they say that. And then in the next scene, Frodo, it just really hit me. They're like, he is taking on this massive burden.
It's another massive Gandalf face moment.
And there's a massive Gandalf. It's the
face
softening of his face. It's so nice. Like, I just love hobbits. That's what he thinks.
Of course, Frodo would decide to take on the burden.
And it is incredible.
Hobbits are so amazing creatures.
And he really is the best of them. It's so good. And then obviously we get all the proper assemble moment.
Everyone decides pretty quickly, don't they? Oh, actually, yeah, the Hobbit can do it.
Yeah.
I'll go with him. I don't know what are they arguing about before that? Whether who gets to take it or whether they should even be taking it at all.
They're all suspicious. I guess this is an alliance which has been in and out. It's like it is like the nations of Western Europe. We're basically pals, but at the same time, we're suspicious of each other.
Yeah.
What about fishing rights?
Yeah.
Who knows what's going on?
Have you heard nothing Lord Elrond has said?
About North Sea cod.
Fishing rights must remain with the elves.
And then the scene really only stretches. Legolas is pretty, by the way, non-existent in this entire film.
I was
It's
thinking
quite
the same
strange.
thing, yeah.
But then I was going to say,
He's pretty non-existent in the entire trilogy, really.
Oh, apart from when he surfs
Apart
down
from
an
when he does a
Oliphant.
cool action thing.
I guess visually they get him right, which really helps. But I was going to say, yeah, Merry and Pippin again, running in. What are we doing? Where are we going? Oh,
Yeah.
shut up.
Yeah.
We're coming too.
This isn't noble anymore. And also everyone's standing awkwardly in a line like they're posing for a photo. Never been quite sure
I
about
like
that.
it. I like it. 9 companions.
They don't even say the company will be 9 to match the 9 riders. That's the whole deal. It's like there's 9 black riders and you're set against them, which is a
Which
scarier
one's yours,
proposition.
Mary? Which one are you taking down?
Take him, mate.
I was going to say, that doesn't really make much sense. Like, yeah, we'll take one each. What do you mean? Not going
Aragorn, you can take 3.
Yeah.
Well, it's
On
just
your own.
It's just the balance, isn't it? Again, it's
Yes.
it's mythical.
Well, I thought because of the 9 rings of men. Well, that's why there's 9 wraiths. Of course, they are those guys.
So it's a balance of good and evil, and that's it. Good doesn't always have the same virtues of strength and fear to set against the darkness.
Very good
They have
point,
other.
Nath.
They have other virtues.
Very good point.
Don't
yeah.
they? That's what.
Well, that's what this is all about.
Anyway, that's all lost in that bit because
Yeah.
they're just like
Rubbish.
yes, you shall go, and then the little
I think
hobbits
it's
are
nice.
jumping
I
up
think
and
there's
down.
just a little. I like and I appreciate the degree of comic relief that Merry and Pippin provide. We've just had quite a big dump of lore and exposition and seriousness.
Yeah, it's true.
The threat is now very real. The Fellowship is formed, and it's just a nice little bit of punctuation at the end of that scene for Merry and Pippin. The line, "Where are we going?" I love it. I think it's a beautiful way to just end it.
They are hiding in the book as well. They're that line from Elrond, even when they are invited to a secret council and you are not. That's basically from the book.
Yeah.
So, I guess they were hiding.
Well,
Mischievous scamps.
so we then leave Rivendell and we get to my favourite sequence of the whole film, maybe my favourite sequence of the whole trilogy, from when they leave Rivendell until when they come out of Moria.
It's basically the Fellowship.
It's
This is
so
the only
this is
bit.
it, isn't it? Yeah.
And I love the way it's just, should we do just like 3 minutes or so of them walking to dramatic music?
When that
Oh,
started, when
yes.
we were watching it this time, I don't know. I saw the last time I saw the films was a marathon 2 years ago, maybe. And I don't know why. It just didn't hit me in the same way when I was in the cinema. When we were watching it the other night, I was like, oh, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I love
the
those
music.
scenes.
The crescendo of it as they all get their profile moment walking past the camera as they go past that crest of the hill. Legolas gets to the top, turns around, Gimli with his axe over his shoulder. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And then them walking up the mountain as well. Lovely bit of trivia that Sean Bean was afraid of helicopters, so he walked.
Yeah, I did know that.
He simply walked all the way up the mountain in his Boromir costume because he was afraid of the helicopter to shoot that scene.
The landscape, it's been said, but it does look unbelievable.
Oh, it's incredible.
Shout out to the best pan of fried food I've ever seen as well. Those sausages look unbelievably
We were
good.
talking, weren't we, about how good the food throughout the film looked?
Yes, yeah. It is fantasy fare. And I don't know, that this bit as well, that bit in particular where like Boromir's training the hobbits and they're
it's
like
just nice.
romping around on the floor. It's just like, it's like that. It's just
That's
a great
the best
adventure.
Time. The best time right there. There's like
Yeah.
that 2 minutes where they're all having just a great time.
Yeah.
They're all just going on a great adventure.
Did
Yeah.
they shout for the Shire and attack Boromir? Is that what
Yes.
they did?
For the Shire! Aragorn's there laughing with his pipe.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the best.
And then Legolas with his keen elf eyes
What do your elf eyes say?
sees the cloud. Oh, it's just a whiff of cloud.
Yeah.
But actually it's Crabine from Dunland, whatever it's called.
Oh, I don't even know what that means.
I don't know either.
Just some
Just
evil
crows, isn't
evil
it? Some evil
crows who
crows.
then go and tell Saruman. And I love the whole cat and mouse of the next bit where Saruman's obviously there with some kind of GPS tracker on the Fellowship. They're not going to go through the Gap of Rohan. They're going to try the mountain. And if that fails, Gandalf, where then will you go? He wants them to go through Moria.
Well, do you know, it's interesting about the things that they condense and the storytelling. Like, there's that bit where he's just looking through a book and it's like a big picture of a Balrog. You know what they found in that.
It's good though.
I've got no problem with
Fantastic.
that.
It is good.
When they first showed that, I remember first seeing that in the cinema and just getting mega goosebumps when he turns the page. Christopher Lee's delivery is amazing. Shadow and flame.
Yeah.
So mysterious and so evil.
Why did the artist in the book not draw the Balrog? He's like, I can't bother.
Because we hadn't seen it in the film yet. He knew, I can't show this fully yet. Because it has to be more of a surprise.
I do like Saruman speaking directly to Gandalf in that bit. He's obviously not to Gandalf, but for all intents and purposes, out loud he is addressing Gandalf, and like an old friend and a rival. It's great. It's just great that's who he's not just talking to his old mate going like, I think they'll go south.
They know each other so well.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
He's horrible, Saruman.
And the foul sound on the wind, or whatever it is that he says.
Fell voice on the air.
Fell voice on the air. Oh, just bellowing at the mountain.
Oh, the fears is far enough.
And the answer is to bellow back like
shaking his staff. Oh my god! And obviously the lovely detail of Legolas just like nimbly walking across the snow whilst everyone else is like trudging.
God,
through
it must be so boring to be Legolas. To be like, just like I could just get up here in no time. You guys
they
are
should
so
have sent
slow.
9 elves.
Yeah,
send 9 elves. Yeah, and Gandalf,
or at least some more elves.
8
I don't know
elves,
why.
1 eagle would have been there in no time. In the book, I think it does a really. What I'm enjoying, having become more familiar with the book since the last time I saw the films, is that it just reminds me. It's like such a nice companion. It's reminding me of bits that I liked in the book. On the mountain, they have this whole thing about when they decide to turn around because it's impassable, and they're all a bit worried about going to Moria. I think that's one of the dramatic differences from the film. Gimli is played for a bit of a fool in the film. We should go. It's going to be great, and he knows that it might not be. But there's this scene of that the snow drifts behind them are terrible, but Boromir and Aragorn plow through it, and they're like exhausted, and they're doing it for hours at a time, and it's just a really big deal. And again, it reminds me of kind of like Norse poems. They're just how strong they are. It's just pages about how big and strong they are. It's great. And
Big,
when I
strong
watch
boys.
it's not that it's Jackson's talked about this a lot. Like, it's not like they didn't meet Tom Bombadil. It's that we didn't show it. And it's similar. Like, when it doesn't directly contradict, I just think it's there somewhere, and I just enjoy it. Even it's consistent with everything that's going on.
Does Gandalf let the ring bearer decide in the book?
He does.
I'm surprised that
but he says, "Do you know what? I'm going to think about this, and I'll let you know in a couple of hours." and they sit down and rest for a bit.
I'm really surprised, I suppose, that he doesn't go with Gandalf's advice. Just an aside.
Yeah.
There's no point behind this, really. I'm just surprised.
I really enjoy how Gandalf is wise enough to realise that despite the fact he is probably the cleverest of the Fellowship, he is not infallible, and even the very wise cannot see all ends, and he is willing to allow events to just happen and shape, like his Gandalf's magic. You often think of Gandalf and wizards like this in fantasy as people who are just firing lightning bolts out of their staffs, but the way he imparts his wisdom and magic is just so wonderful throughout all of the films. Just this guiding light, a kindling of a flame of hope.
It is wisdom. That's exactly right.
It's fantastic, and I love the look on his face. Again, another great Gandalf look when Frodo says, "We will go through the mines." So be it. Oh, it's fantastic. So good.
Just
God.
A quiet moment there as we all did the face. It is great. What do you make of the shift in Gimli? I mean, I like. Do you know? It always seems strange, but then again, it's about the time. It speaks to an older world and a world that Tolkien was writing in, but then also the world that he was writing about, where there could be an expedition of a very famous dwarf party, and they're trying to reclaim an entire realm, or at least city, and for there to be no news. But that not necessarily. It's like, we might not have heard of them. And I guess that around this time, or at least in the stories that Tolkien would have grown up reading, people are doing expeditions to uncharted worlds, and you might not hear from them, and it could be bad news, or it might not be bad news. And that's the Gimli is in the book. Everyone's much more chill with that. I don't know. In the film, it did always strike me as a bit odd that he wouldn't be a bit more worried. You know what I mean?
I think it works for the film. Like you can't assume that everyone going in there has any kind of knowledge of anything. Gimli's there as just like, that's basically a device for the audience to have some kind of shock and surprise when they finally get into Moria and find that it's actually full of the corpses of dwarves, and you feel a little bit of sympathy with Gimli, who's been very excited to go and see his cousin Balin, assuming he's alive.
Some of the noises
and
he
they're all
makes.
going to have their bellies filled with, wonderful ripe meat off the bone and beer and mead, and then they get in there and it's just awful. But it's so good, isn't it? When the Watcher in the water just slams down all of the rocks and it just goes black and quiet for a couple of moments, and Gandalf, we now have but one choice. His little light comes on. We must face the long, dark Moria.
Do you know,
Fantastic.
my introduction to The Hobbit was that the year above me in infant school did it as a play.
Oh, wow.
And so, every class in infant school for a week would be making spiders' webs for the bit with spiders. And I remember the whole school got super into riddles. And I remember making up riddles.
Who got to play Gollum in the play?
I can't even remember which kid.
Why
it was.
didn't my school do this? Oh, it could have been my chance.
But then later on, I can't remember why, but we did other scenes, but not from The Hobbit, from Lord of the Rings. And the door and the speak, friend, and enter, I guess maybe because it's kind of a riddle. So there's this old image of that painted by school children that's in my head. And I really like that scene. And the Watcher is kind of do other beasts like that exist? Do you know what I mean? What is it? Never explained. I enjoy that. What order of creature is the Watcher?
I always found the riddle slightly frustrating just because I just think it's so unbelievably simple.
How am I supposed to know it's Elvish?
And there's that, and just it's a dwarven door, but it's an Elvish word. But I just think Gandalf should get it. It's literally just speak, friend, and enter.
It's too simple. It's too simple for Gandalf.
Perhaps you're right. Yeah,
he's going through. I think in the book he goes through countless spells and incantations that he knows. And there are going to be a lot of those.
Yeah.
And none of them work. And also, I think the optimism of the riddle, is what catches them off guard as well, because it's a riddle from a simpler time when elves and dwarves were friends. And it's all you have to do is say the word friend and you can come in.
Yeah.
And the world is a darker, more scary place at this point, which is another reason why they just wouldn't think it was something so just optimistic.
We all watched
idiots and enter.
We all watched Rings of Power season 1, right?
Yes.
And I did enjoy that. I thought that was one of the more careful bits. I haven't watched season 2 yet, but the relationship between
Elrond,
Durin and Elrond.
Oh,
is
yeah.
it Durin Junior? Oh,
yes, I think so. Yeah.
And Elrond.
Durin Junior.
and so now in my head, when it's speak friend, it represents that kind of relationship and that bond between the elves and the dwarves, which is no longer the same.
No,
and even in Rings of Power, the thing it does do is explain how it's an unusual friendship, and it's quite good. The one bit of Rings of Power I really enjoyed.
I really like Elrond in the Rings of Power.
Yeah, Robert Thingy.
He's good.
Who played young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones as well.
Yeah, he did. Classic.
Well played.
That's got to be on IMDb trivia somewhere, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's so well known by nerds that it's not even on the trivia.
But I think Mario's the best. Oh, it's just the best, isn't it? It's so good.
Finding the tomb and the book, and it is, I'm sure, maybe I've seen it because things have ripped this off, but as a device, just, we've seen it in video games. That's where we've seen it, millions of times, in diaries and journals and whatever, but they are coming.
Yeah.
It's so good. Drums in the deep.
And the way the writing just trails off.
I think in another film I would absolutely take the piss out of that, but I think they get away with it just about on this.
Are they coming or are they here during? Because it looks like your writing has been absolutely.
Oh, you knocked me there. I was writing.
I like how long it takes. Gandalf says it's going to take. It's a 4-day journey to the other side, and the film does a really good job, I think, of conveying. Even more so in the extended edition, you get more. I think they look down upon an awe of Mithril, and they talk a little bit about Mithril before the reveal of Frodo a bit later on with his Mithril vest. But immediately you remember Moria and you think of the action sequence, but there's a lot to it before that, and it's not just a place full of orcs. It's this incredibly historical place, and the bit where he
is it before? It's before the fight, isn't it? Where he the hall
shows the Dwarrow Dwell, for whatever it's called, the ancient dwarven city. I love that bit so much. Another bit where I was almost crying, just because it's so majestic and of another age.
Yeah.
and that's what I like so much about Tolkien's work as well, is that it's so rich. And he's thought of all of this, and like you said, again, when you go from the books to the film, just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it necessarily hasn't happened within the story, but also just the sense that there's all of this other stuff that has happened before, and we're just stumbling upon it. And when he lights it up, and you just see those pillars
rows and rows
going off into almost infinity.
No,
it's amazing.
It's incredible. I always feel like these are the things which when I escape to this kind of literature, and it's obviously got like a nostalgic element to me because of having been immersed in it when I was a kid. These are the things I'm really trying to get a hit of again in all of my hours of playing video games and reading stuff now. I want a sense of what it was like to see this on the screen for the first time. I'm pretty sure I watched this with our mutual friend Matt Elliott in the Cineworld Cinema, or UCI it might have been then, in Sheffield, and just I think both of us just absolutely freaking out at the scale of Moria specifically. And I think that the pacing of it, the way that they're forced in, the foreboding, subtle foreshadowing of the fact it's going to go.
Oh my God! Is there there's got to be a subtle foreshadowing meme.
And then they go in, and then the tragedy of finding Balin's tomb, and then that action sequence, that fight that happens then. It's the first time the Fellowship gets into it.
Yeah,
and it's just it's great action. Just really great.
Everybody gets a bit. Everybody's taking part.
And the hobbits don't do too much.
No.
And then you're released back into this incredible location, but with like this driving sense of we've got to get out of here, and it gives it this whole other.
It is fantastic as well. Howard Shore again, his music when they're just walking through Moria, like that, just ominous undertones mixed with one. Oh my God, how does he do it? Just he conveys he absolutely nails the correct emotional tone for every scene and every place. But yeah, the action scene where I think it does such a good job of characterizing everyone as well. It's the first time we've really gotten to know the Fellowship outside of their dialogue with one another, and I think a lot of character building happens in that fight. Like we get to see how Boromir fights, how Aragorn fights, how Legolas fights, and we get their sort of, Aragorn's slightly clumsy, spontaneous, instinctive style of fighting. Legolas's incredibly elegant, precise, calm, cool way of fighting. Sam fighting with his frying pan. That's so good. And that's from my old gaffer.
Well, and I even thought, I was like thinking, this isn't a very Tolkien line, but just the sardonic way that Sean Bean says, they have a cave troll. and I remember again being in the cinema thinking, I'm going to get to see a fucking cave. This is awesome. But again, it's about fighting who's so used to being on the front lines. He's like, another day of this, is it? Like, and again, competent. You're right. The character of all of them is shown through the fight. And like I said, not allowing the hobbits to do too much because they are tiny, but they are also
brave, really brave.
Yeah. We've
great scene.
Glossed over or missed out just before we keep moving forwards. Just the little bit of Gollum and I really enjoy just in the film overall how sparingly Gollum is shown and used. And I don't know to what degree he's spoken about in the book at this bit, but I love that bit of Frodo spotting Gollum, not knowing it's Gollum. Obviously, just we're being followed, and Gandalf already knowing. And just
again, the wisdom.
Like, he's been following
us for 3 days.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also like you said, Rob. It's the who knows what part he'll have to play for better or worse. By the end of this all.
Yeah,
and it's about the wisdom to just keep things in play, not trying to control everything, not trying to always just do
well,
the
I think
right thing.
that conversation there is going to be very important for the next 2 movies for Frodo, with his dealings with Gollum and his sort of pity for Gollum, and also his belief that Gollum can be more than the sum of his parts, kind of.
Gollum's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to discussing, again, like, really the idea of, is Gollum a good guy? Is he a bad guy? What's Tolkien's take on him? What does he represent? And I think that it's like a really interesting, rich character.
This is what I did my dissertation on. Not a thesis. I never did a thesis. My undergraduate dissertation was on ambiguous characters in fantasy cinema, which is a bit of a woolly topic. I basically just wanted to write about Gollum.
Did you do Snape?
I did Snape, and I did Edmund as well from the
From Narnia.
from the Narnia book.
Look, who can resist a little bit of Turkish delight? who among us?
But I think in the books as well, I've not got to this bit on my reread yet, but I have a distinct memory of being really frightened by this image as well. I can't remember whether or not they spot him in Moria, but they certainly spot him following them on the river afterwards. I think he's inside a log. And
He looks
Frodo,
like a log.
Frodo sees what he thinks is a log, but then realises the log is looking at him with eyes and is just paddling very quietly along behind their boats. And I remember as a child finding that image horrifying.
That is horrifying.
Oh God,
yeah.
Gollum's spying on them. He's following them.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Great though. Great
Yeah.
stuff.
Love Gollum.
Yeah.
And then
the Balrog.
the Balrog is, and we've done more comparing to the book than I thought, but this scene in the film is all-timer.
Yeah.
Absolute all-timer. And the only thing that I would say is I also enjoy, there's nothing I don't enjoy about this whole sequence, the collapsing stairway kind of pillars. I remember thinking I've not seen anything of that scale on screen. I was so engaged with it. I was so wrapped. And then I knew vaguely what was going to happen, that Gandalf was going to stand up to this other order of being and that he was going to fall. And it just played out beautifully in the film. In the book, he senses that there's something there and he's less sure what it is. And it's described much less clearly. Doesn't necessarily have wings. It's not, and it's almost a man, but covered in shadow and flame at the same time. And it's, I like the idea in a kind of a Lovecraftian way, I guess, but that there are things which are uncanny to the point of, well, it's like when Gandalf, the description that he then gives in the Two Towers of him, what did he say? Fell through all the age of the earth or whatever it was, like just he was fighting the Balrog basically through almost an eternity. And that's a long time. How do you represent that? That's quite difficult, isn't it? So I kind of miss the uncanniness of the Balrog.
Yes.
But then this version is also,
again, you gotta make it just dramatic for the screen. And
it's unbelievable.
I'm completely in favour of all of the changes they made. Really, for the added, I think they got it right. They got a perfect mix of keeping quite a lot of Tolkien's dialogue. In fact, quite a lot of the dialogue between Gandalf and Frodo during the scene in the book where Gandalf is revealing to him the true nature of the ring. There's a lot of dialogue all in that scene, in about 10 really condensed pages in the book that is then sprinkled. Gandalf offers this dialogue throughout, like where he's talking to Frodo about Bilbo sparing Gollum's life and how the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many. That is a line taken from that scene in Bag End right at the beginning. But all of the changes they did make, I thought, they just made sense for the film. It wouldn't have been that dramatic if it was just a shadowy man on fire. And in the book, I think it's Legolas who realizes what it is. And he says like, "Oh my God, a Balrog." He doesn't say, "Oh my God." He says, "A Balrog is come," or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And it's Legolas gets a little bit of that when Gandalf in the film reveals that it is a Balrog. Another great bit of Gandalf face. Yeah. He's just like eyes closed, then slowly looks up, and Legolas is the only one of the Fellowship who realizes what a Balrog is. Legolas being thousands of years old, and you can see the fear and the terror in Legolas's face, whereas Aragorn's like, "What the heck's Balrog?"
Yeah,
I don't know what that is. What
do you say? This is a foe beyond any of you.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a line!
A foe is beyond any of you.
Well, I think in the book, I think Gandalf tries to seal the door, and his magic is repelled in such a way that I think he's thrown through the air, and then he catches up with the others, and he's like, "Fucking hell, lads!"
Yeah,
it is not
it's
good.
bad actually. Yeah.
It's actually quite bad.
Swords are no more use here.
Are the orcs raining arrows down upon them in the book? Because I was just like, obviously love it, but it was like, for God's sake, guys, like, just give us a break. It's a Balrog. We don't also need arrows coming across.
I can't remember the description.
Good bit of Legolas sniping. Sniper action.
Great shot.
Great shot.
The first real instance you get of Legolas is really good with his bow and arrow.
Yeah.
He'll just, and all of the goblin and orc shots just missing, and every single shot that comes from the Fellowship, straight on target.
I love the way that they have done the effects for arrows moving through the air. They don't just arc perfectly.
No.
They do seem to have a bit of swaz, as they would say.
Some swaz. Yeah. I actually knew
Cultured finish from Aragorn.
Yeah.
I actually met the first supervisor of SWAS, the SWAS supervisor for the movies, and they did a great job. I obviously, as we've mentioned, did watch this movie knowing nothing. So You Shall Not Pass, I completely bought that he defeated the Balrog, and it was so good and heart-rending. And I'm watching it now, even it's so well done. You know, his whip is introduced a little bit sparingly before that moment, and obviously he's got it, and it's so good. It's so good. The relief of and the wow of Gandalf's done it. He's defeated this massive foe, and the music drops, and it's kind of slow motion, and it just enough as well. It just gets him just enough. It's just perfect. And of course, Fly You Fools is an all-timer, although also misquoted to all time as well, I think.
Fly away.
I used to think it was Run You Fools for some reason. But yeah.
And then I think the film probably takes as big a turn. We're at the moment in Star Wars where Obi-Wan and they're back on the Millennium Falcon, they're sad. Imagine that scene, but in terms of how heightened that is, we've only met Gandalf an hour and a half before this, and then like the music, like the sound drops out, you've got incredibly sad choral singing, just slow motion pictures of people rocking.
Yeah.
Like, it works.
The amount of time in the appendices that actors have talked about, it was a crying day today. Just had to cry on set all day. It's really hard.
And Aragorn's like, get them up.
Yeah.
Aragorn. Get them up.
Yeah.
Sean Bean wants... Give them a moment for pity's sake. Let them grieve.
But Gandalf is the one who knows what's going on. It seems, throughout the whole movie, he's the one who realised what the ring was and everything. It feels like a huge loss because he's the best of them in many ways. Not maybe
the leader
not
of the
them,
company.
He's the leader.
And I think that those things are really impressed upon you in the book. That who's leading the company, and then Aragorn's very he talks about trying to do his part, living up to Gandalf's part. I think it's like testament to maybe the power of the template of the story, or how well it's told. That moment, it does seem like a huge deserved and earned moment in the film, and that we are incredibly what it means. It's so funny, isn't it, that the Fellowship is at the core of my Lord of the Rings experience, but it's only together for a tiny bit. It's maybe the best bit of the films, and then it's already it's over.
Yeah, I think it's true of kind of like Star Wars as well. It's funny how as in Luke, Leia, and Han, and Chewie, and the droids are only together for a little bit of the first movie, really. But it feels like that is the kind of
it's a life lesson there, probably somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah,
you got to enjoy the good times before Gandalf falls down an endless abyss.
Yeah,
and then we move on to Lothlorien.
I'd forgotten about Lothlorien.
No, where they go there for a bit.
Yeah,
they do. I can't say that I love Elves Volume 2.
It's my least favourite bit of the film, I think, Lothlorien.
I really like Galadriel and your lady there from Australia.
Kate Blanchett.
Yeah, I don't know why her name escaped me. They really are running at a different frame rate, aren't they? They are slowed down, but they still talk at the same speed. I don't know how they do that. That's great. I always say, for I much desire to speak with him. That's something I said there's quotes that we've even skipped over just from this one, and we've been doing quite a few anyway.
Yes.
We didn't do... What about very old friends?
I've got questions on that.
Oh, sorry. I don't really like the foresight stuff. I don't really like looking into the mind of men. I do quite like that it explain Elrond. First of all, he's half elven. They don't really talk about that in the films, but he is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a big important reason for that, which goes back thousands of years. But that's the last homely house.
Yes.
And I guess this does give a good sense of how elevated and other elves are. And in the books, in the film too, but Sam's always going on, you think there was elves in those woods over there? And it's like, no, Sam, stop it. But he always wants to see them and hear about them. And I guess this does give a sense of how how much higher a level of being they are. Like Rob was saying about them dancing about in The Hobbit, talking about people looking delicious or whatever. They were a very long way. They're basically angels, aren't they? Like at this point,
Yeah.
I guess. And this scene does a good job of that.
I like. Well, I both like and don't fully comprehend, I think, the scene, but where she kind of tests herself. I feel sad for Frodo that he's just a part of this, an unwitting part of this test, where she's like, I'm going to try and get the ring from you now, but actually not try and get it.
And do you want the ring? Why don't any of these really powerful, capable people want this ring?
Yeah.
Well, you know a little bit about that from Rings of Power, right? That's the vague, and that's kind of what I mean, that there is, because I don't think it's necessarily been written always down in a completely consistent, codified way by Tolkien. You get like conversations of a past to these characters. Like Galadriel is a ring bearer and has been around since before the forging of the ring, has maybe contemplated a time where it might come to her or she might have a chance to, and what would she do at that moment. And so this is not that you'd know if you're just watching it in the cinema, but
No.
those things do feed in.
It's interesting watching Galadriel, and this is the first time I've seen the film, I think, post watching The Rings of Power, which goes quite deep into the sort of connection that Galadriel has with Sauron. And there's a little bit of almost sexual tension between them.
I wonder if
where
Tolkien
Sauron's
would have
like, come on, Galadriel, be my queen, be my dark queen, come on, let's rule Middle-earth together. And then seeing her, obviously, looking at the One Ring all these thousands of years later.
Actually, Galadriel is one of the characters I've most enjoyed learning about in The Rings of Power. And obviously season 2 kind of deals with the forging of the rings, not the One Ring, but the Rings of Power. Surprise. And yeah, I've been looking forward to watching this film, having kind of met young Galadriel now, to see just how it makes me feel about it. I think it is additive. I think it's been valuable.
That's all I wanted from Rings of Power, really. And I don't think that I really trust it to be an authentic mouthpiece for those sort of disparate elements of Tolkien's work. But I can enjoy it as, like I said, those relationships, some scenes are good.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not like firm backstory for Galadriel, but it's interesting ideas, thoughts. I enjoy.
Galadriel's cool fighting days are long behind her.
They are.
When we meet her in the Fellowship
But she
of the Ring.
can turn blue whenever she wants. So that's good, isn't it?
That's a good
When she turned blue.
trick.
Do you know, it's funny that these films are among my favourite films, and I think it's a long time after they've been released now, I'm always going to love these films. But it is interesting to see where they're going to age and which bits are going to age. Like Elrond's face is going to age. You know what I mean? In another 5-10 years, people are going to be like, Jesus Christ, Elrond's face.
The superimposed Elrond face.
Yeah. And similarly, the Galadriel's...
I don't know if that's going to age that badly.
I in the cinema was like...
It's a bit fuzzy.
I'm astonished how well it's aged just in general.
I wonder if that's because we love it from then.
Maybe. But I was watching it thinking, are the effects going to hold up? There are a couple of places where I think they're going back to the Shire now. I think that the scene with Ian Holm and Ian McKellen both in Bag End together is exceptionally well done. It's insane. There's a couple of bits where Bilbo walks in front of Ian McKellen and you can see the green screenness of it, and how they're not really in the same physical place. But flipping heck, it's wizardry.
I've genuinely never seen it.
It's the bit where Ian McKellen hands him his staff and his hat, and Ian Holm takes it. How are you doing that? I understand you just film both of them in separate sets, but you're actually handing physical objects to each other.
I'm not saying there's no craft in digital effects, but I love practical and physical craft. For me, if you can get that even close to right,
I've genuinely never seen it. I've never seen these issues that people speak about with that with the scale of the Hobbits in particular, like acting with real people. I've always bought into it.
There are a couple of shots in the film where obviously for wider shots they will use like children.
It's loads of children
as the Hobbits. and there are a couple of shots where, and you'll see it if you watch the appendices, they have quite crude face masks of Elijah Wood and Sean Astin, in the scene when they've just left the Shire and Gandalf's walking them. It's before the bit where he says, "Remember the ring wants to be found." If you look at Frodo's face, it's just this awful. Just look at Frodo's face during that bit. And there's also a bit where he's on the cart with Gandalf right at the beginning, and it's a shot of the hill and the cart's coming around the corner. Again, Elijah Wood's face just this expressionless rubber mask.
4K has not been kind.
It's very funny when you but it's only when you know to look for it, I think.
So back on Galadriel, she's revealing things to people. Again, in the book, I can take that the each of them has quite a profound either realization or Gimli has this complete about face about elves. It kind of reveals that while dwarves, or Gimli in particular, can be forthright and stubborn and maybe a bit oafish, he's also happy to say when he's wrong, and he's kind of there's like a I don't know, like an earnestness to him. I guess you do get some of that. He's humbled in the presence of Galadriel in the film as well. And I was going to say just about Boromir, who is to be revealed very shortly to be ultimately kind of a flawed and tragic figure, and Galadriel can see that and knows that. And I don't know how I felt about that, or who knows, like, does Frodo kind of know already? And why they just kind of let it carry on like that. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying, really. It feels a little bit unfair to Boromir that no one's tapping him on the shoulder and going, "Mate, just don't do it."
Yeah.
Or why don't you stay here?
Yeah.
Don't go.
Well, I was really struck just by, because Galadriel basically incepts the idea that Frodo needs to leave them all behind, right? But she sort of says, "You know what you got to do." Does he know what he's got to do?
Maybe it's like a therapist. You already know.
I found that interesting. Just like, I'm not sure if he does know what he's got to do at that point. That certainly she's basically told him. And
she tells Boromir there's still hope for his people as well.
Yeah.
Technically true.
I found this all very interesting this time.
Just
actually.
none for him.
Yeah.
The kind of, the scene we're coming up to where with some people being able to accept that Frodo does need to do this without them. It's really interesting.
I love that. Where people are like, we're on a mission, we're all together, let's keep going. And we've skipped right ahead now, but there's that moment where it happens twice. Oh, I think it was actually where I'm quite emotional now. What? Why? But this is where I think I teared up through the whole Boromir scene. Yeah. I loved that scene. And this is right before that. But it's that scene, and it's an invention of the film where Merry and Pippin are on the other side of the path. And maybe it's because they've been idiots. And this is the moment where they're taking some responsibility. And they realise what's happening. And I guess in a way, this is their feelings from the book really early on, where they know he has to leave and they're dignified about it. It happens to them at this moment, and then they do the right thing. Oh, it's great. And what I'm saying is there's some people who are like, we need to keep this mission together. And then the acceptance that comes afterwards is just really noble. And that's what gets me. God, I am actually quite...
That's a good bit. It's everyone's acceptance. Frodo's acceptance that he has to leave them
Aragorn
behind.
accepts it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Like, so willingly. They all accept it, apart from Sam.
Well, there's that line, and again, I'd forgotten about it until now, his use of tenses just fast forwards us, and it throws us emotionally. There's like just a little somersault where the whole scene with Boromir has just happened. Aragorn finds him, and he closes the hand around Frodo's own hand around the ring, and he says, "I would have gone with you to the end." And it's like, I already know we're not going now, and that you've got to go on your own because the Fellowship has failed. Great. And then you get the Merry and Pippin moment, and then Boromir has his last stand. Fucking hell, I was just in bits.
It's amazing. Like, we haven't even talked about the birth of the Uruk-hai, which I think it taps into... I recognise some of Peter Jackson's earlier films in that. I can't remember whether it's Brain Dead or Bad Taste, but like the grossness of the birth of the Uruk-hai
100%,
is so fantastic. The violence of their birth just through that sack, and the first thing it does is just throttle that other orc, which just stands there for a little moment before it falls and collapses and dies. Oh, it's so good.
I quite like that his orc friend tries to help, sort of goes to help, and Saruman's like, no. But I don't know, I do like that they're just not completely mindless, creatures that they do, he's It's got a little bit of feeling for his mate there, who's being just killed by.
I do often give thoughts to Orc, like. So where are they? What does a town look like? Do you know what I mean? What are they doing when they go into Mordor at the very end of Return of the King? There's what they call Gorbag and the other one, and they're like arguing in a tunnel. I used to have a poster of them.
Bogrot. I can't remember what it's called. Something like that.
Snagrat. And anyway.
Yes, I think it might be Snagrat. I used to have top trump cards of them all. I can't remember the names.
I used to have Gorbag and like sneering with the red eye of Sauron on them. It's an Alan Lee poster, brilliant. And but yeah, they're just chatting, and all of their kind of intra like unit politics. I'm so there for all of that.
Yeah.
And then I think in the film, the Uruk-hai, I still don't really have it straight in my head. I know they're kind of like they've crossed men and orcs so they can run in the daylight. That's kind of the vibe.
Yeah.
You never really get a sense of how it's done, and I think that it's weird enough in the film. It's like they just come out of the earth. We dug a big hole.
Yeah.
We burned all these trees. Yeah. And now these guys are in
just
sacks.
some kind of diabolical bit of magical interbreeding that Saruman's overseen,
but somehow only possible also through industry, which I think is appropriate. Oh, I'm still sad about Boromir,
the pacing of that whole sequence is fantastic. From when Aragorn starts fighting like 20 Uruk-hai at once.
Yeah.
You got like the horn of Gondor blowing off in another just 100 200 yards away. Legolas comes in when it looks like Aragorn's about to be overwhelmed, and just he kills one of them by shoving an arrow through its face, then takes that arrow back and then fires it at another Uruk-hai.
Yeah, it's great.
There's so many cool little moments here that were replicated in the Two Towers video game. Like you get to fight this fight sequence, I think, quite early on in the game.
Oh, that's
so many moves that I saw Legolas using in this film that are then replicated in the game. It's cool as hell.
This actually does happen in the book in Two Towers, doesn't it? So maybe that's why they put it in the game. That's what I would do if I was making that game.
And then Gimli throwing his axe. It's the first time you see that trio, which becomes like quite an iconic trio, I guess, throughout the rest of the trilogy,
boys.
fighting together, the lads. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. And then Boromir's last stand is just amazing.
I've skipped because I got carried away. I've obviously skipped us past Boromir's attempt to snatch the ring, and I like it. They all land on the shore, and then it's kind of where's Frodo, and then someone's where's Boromir, and there's just that shot of his shield. It's like fuck.
No one even says where's Boromir. Aragorn just looks, and we see the shield, and everyone knows. Boromir.
I'm just collecting some wood.
Just some wood, for everyone to keep warm.
It's a brilliant bit of acting by Sean Bean.
Yeah.
In this sequence,
he's just cursed, isn't he? He's just doomed, Boromir.
There's a really great moment just before that when they see the big statues of the kings.
The Argonauts.
There's just a great close up on Boromir's face, looking at them, and you just get this kind of sense of what he's thinking. I don't know exactly what he's thinking, obviously, but I mean, I guess just he's pondering the power, the kings, the power of men. What can they do with the ring? It's just he manages to convey all this emotion just in this little look at the past.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
Again, absolutely blown away by that moment the first time I saw the film, and basically every time I see the film. Exactly what Rob said about there being this power in ruin or the deeds of ages gone by, and really specifically with Boromir, the difficulty of being the steward, and I guess you again understanding it within the context of kind of the class hierarchy or the kind of chain of being almost of like the Tolkien universe, him not being a king, being of a noble line but not a king, and then seeing the great works of the old kings and knowing that that he's kind of knowing who he's with, knowing what they're doing, like you said, and just it's the Boromir is just such a tragic figure for me, and then the that's why his last stand is one of my favorite scenes, just because of how fucking badass he is, and how sneaky it is for them to kill him with arrows. Go and fight him properly, and then the moment with Aragorn, which just
it's
I honestly can't talk about.
It's badass, but like not in a ridiculous way. He's not like I love the way it's handled, the way he gets shot, and it really means something. He stumbles, he's on his knees, he takes like a bunch of breaths where he's like, "Oh God, that really hurts," but then he comes out of it for a moment, like, "No, I've got to keep fighting. I've got to fight on," and he fights on a bit more, and he takes another arrow, and he's down again. It's like he's not like a superhero or anything.
No.
He's just a man. Like he's gonna die, but he's just not giving up yet. It's like it's fantastically handled and acted, and it's such a good, like, coming good story. Like it's not even like he's sunk that low until, like, just, he's not a bad guy in this film, apart from when he tries to snatch the ring.
I think it's so important to realize that the thing that happened to him is the thing that will happen to everyone.
Yes,
and
right.
It's just happened to him first for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And that he's a man who is his whole cause, and the only thing he has to excel at is to defend his people, and he's just doing it the best way he knows how.
Yeah.
And Sean Bean's like desperate dying breath acting, just sort of clasping at Aragorn, clasping for his sword.
He's very good. He's very experienced when it comes to this now.
Yeah, that's true. But then, the Lords of Gondor are home? All of that scene, I would have gone with you. Like,
Yeah.
I love it so much.
I would have followed you, my brother.
Yeah.
My captain, my king. That scene is great. I love it just as a bit of, like, I do enjoy how the Lord of the Rings is not afraid to show men showing affection for each other.
No, not at all.
Aragorn is in tears. He kisses Boromir on the forehead as he's lays dying and dead. And Aragorn's probably like the manliest man of all. Like he's like the perfect example of masculinity, Aragorn. He's got everything.
He's very kingly, though, and and he knows that Boromir is under his protection in a way. And if he's going to accept being king, he also has to accept Boromir and all of his faults.
And Boromir is the most affectionate, probably, of the Fellowship. Maybe not aside from Gandalf, like with the hobbits, especially. Like we were laughing earlier about him teaching them to sword fight, and they're rolling around on the floor together and whatever. Like he is one of the more warm characters.
He is,
quite quickly with the group, and like
he's just got a little brittleness in his soul, doesn't he?
He's very human. No, he's literally
very human.
The only just pure human of the lot. I guess Aragorn is like a higher form of human than Boromir is.
Yeah.
And
that's the end.
And we're basically at the end, and like obviously, Frodo.
The best line is when Frodo's got he's holding the ring. He's at the river, and he's he remembers saying to Gandalf, "I wish this had never come to me. I wish this had never happened." And then Gandalf's line, and it's a slightly different delivery than the line, than how he delivers it in Moria. He even says it slightly differently as well. It's not the exact same line. It's tweaked very slightly. And I don't know whether I don't think it's a mistake, but I don't know whether it's just they've decided we'll use an alternate cut here because that fits better, or whether it is deliberately some kind of magic Gandalf is using from some other place, wherever he is at this point in time, to just have his voice and that line come into Frodo's head at that moment. And the line it's just so fantastic.
Yeah, well, and the
line is I struggle to say this line because it's my favourite line in the whole thing. It's like, "So do all who live to see such times. That is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you." And he says it with such a... In Moria, he says it a little bit quicker. It's like, all you have to decide is what to do with that time. But here, he drags it out a little bit, and there's a little bit of, I don't know what it is. There's a quality to it that really, you can see it in Frodo's face as well. Like a little bit of resolve comes into his eyes as he hears Gandalf's voice in his head, and off he goes with Sam to Mordor.
About Sam's line. Well, actually, do you know what? There is that moment of Sam. They give quite a lot of to Sam nearly drowning.
That water.
Frodo, how long are you going to leave him there? For God's sake!
Just sinking.
That water gets deep really quick as well. And it's the classic thing. Would Sam have been able to swim if Frodo hadn't have said, "Sam, you can't swim"? He's like, "Oh yeah, no."
There is, do you know, it's beautifully placed because there are all these moments which really get me extremely emotionally heightened, and then there's "I'm going to Mordor alone," and of course you are, and I'm coming with you.
Yeah, that's a great line.
I never have I watched it with a crowd where that hasn't gone over beautifully well.
And there's also a great lift with Legolas and Aragorn and Gimli,
Of course,
deciding,
strapping up.
like, well, we've got a new quest. We've got to go and rescue Merry and Pippin.
Yeah, we will not surrender.
And they've
Merry
run
and
up that hill. I'm never not impressed.
They're just running
to
for
see
days.
everyone run.
They'll be running for
everywhere.
an entire movie next time.
And there is that sense again that everyone wants, like, the whole deal is they're going to write a song about this. We'll do this and they'll write a song about it. It'll be brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. We've made it through the whole film.
I'm quite emotional.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions before we get to mailbag.
Yeah.
We've talked about how great this film is.
Yeah.
I thought it would just be fun to flip our usual questions on their head.
Yeah.
And ask, what's the worst scene in the film?
Yeah.
You scumbag.
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know if it counts as a scene. I do think that bit.
Or the bit.
The bit. The Elrond's face and Elrond face is a bad bit, and there is some gratuitous use of slow motion. I noticed this time, like very slow motion, the sort of juddery frames of just lots of it. But I think Elrond face.
Merry
is the
and
worst
Pippin
bit.
stealing the fireworks has always been my least favourite.
Really?
Film. Yeah.
Meriadoc Brandybuck and Peregrine Took.
Is that because of the characters from the book, or?
Even when I wasn't so familiar with how they were in the book, it was just verging slightly onto broad slapstick, which is not my fave.
Yeah, it is slapstick, that's for sure. What about you, Rob?
I mean, you're probably going to think this is controversial, and this also feeds into a
It'll not be
question.
about Sean Bean.
It's also, I've got who do you think gave the worst performance?
Right.
Question later on. My least favourite scene is the Galadriel, you would have a queen scene. It just doesn't land for me really at all. It's overly cheesy, and I think the elves of Lothlorien are just hammed up a little bit too much. They're too ethereal, too monotone, too slow, and they all talk like that. Very mysterious.
Yeah.
Just lighten up a bit. My God.
I think it's a proper lull. It's the one lull in the movie that section, and I accept. It's just off the back of Gandalf, dying / disappearing, and it's you can't really keep the pace up. But it is, that whole bit is a bit of a lull. But that specific moment, I like more than the way she looks. I like the way she sounds. Sounds very
I think
cool.
that I don't like that. I'm going to pick that scene as well. I don't like how it is in the film particularly either. They do use the more or less verbatim the stuff from the book, and I think that when it's in the book you get a sense of the things that she's saying. Instead of a Dark Lord, you'd have a queen, and then she describes herself in these really natural terms, more terrible than the sea and these sorts of things, and that gives a different sense of the elves and who they are and the things that they hold as important. But those things can also be twisted and contorted and made, what's the word? Despotic, I guess. But I still don't like it.
Yeah.
So that scene. What about you, Dave?
Fair enough. Well, I said Elrond face.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
not really a
Elrond
scene.
face.
It's just I do think that bit really stands out
Elves, tricky.
as bad.
Tricky to get elves
Yeah.
right, apparently.
It is.
Yeah.
Worst performance.
Oh, this is negative.
Yeah.
Negative.
But for good reason. 'Cause
Least.
what we're saying
What's your
is-
least favourite performance? What's the least good performance?
I don't know. Maybe it's Orlando Bloom.
He doesn't do anything.
He doesn't do anything.
He's just a good elf.
But it's just like the lines he has. It just he's just a bit flat, isn't he?
Wow.
He's great as an action character, like we said.
Yeah.
Like he can fire an arrow. My God, he can walk on snow. He doesn't get much to do in this movie.
Doesn't
and
get much to
what he
do.
gets to do, he just like at the Council of Elrond, he doesn't really stamp his character on it. I get a real good sense of
I don't
Gimli.
get a sense that he's old. That is true. I don't really get a sense that he's old. I don't like his performance in The Hobbit at all, and that makes me think I do like it here.
Honestly, it's not even his performance really. It's just I don't think Legolas is that great. I guess it is his performance. I don't know. I think I was trying to think of like a background artist or an extra or something, because I think everyone's fantastic. And
I was
already
going to say, I'm
mentioned,
not
like,
going to choose. I refuse.
you have to choose.
No, I'm not going to.
Loser.
No.
He's abstained from the vote.
I will, yeah.
My least favourite performance, Kate Blanchett. I just think it's over-egged.
This is very
It's overdone a little bit, and I understand it's probably Peter Jackson. More ethereal, more mysterious. I think her monologue at the beginning is great.
Yeah.
I think when you meet her, it's just that look she gives him after Frodo has looked in the thing. I know what it is you saw. It's just a bit strange.
This has made me realise that if I did have a least favourite performance, it's the guy who plays Isildur. And he's like, no. He just does a really big smug face.
Yeah.
That guy.
Oh, God.
Okay. What was the most heavily memed bit that was most difficult to not laugh at when you saw it? Because there are loads of these.
Yeah.
Like the whole film is like one big meme. It's just hilarious internet meme after hilarious internet meme.
I can't help myself but say, after all, why not all the time?
Yeah.
So I think that line in particular does stand out for me.
It has affected how you watch it for me. It's so well loved, and it's so, we talked about how memes before are like, they're like an evolution of how you would talk about your favorite bits from a film.
This is what I was going to say.
And now it's just, we're so overloaded now on social media with the bits from The Lord of the Rings that are quotable, that everyone knows, that everyone loves, applied in humorous situations. Like the bit where Gandalf's like, I'm not trying to rob you, I'm trying to help you. And there's a meme where it's a dog with a ball. I'm not trying to take the ball away from you, I'm trying to throw it for you.
I love it. I love that there's this endless format now where people can show their love of a thing, whether it's Star Wars or whatever. And it's fandom in like this mirror infinity of the internet, just endlessly replicating itself. And I kind of love it. And then it is interesting to go back to the original and then see where those moments come from. And it's also interesting sometimes to see how people have made meme formats by making quite elegant edits of scenes where it's 4 images. Like I love the all right then, keep your secrets.
Yes.
Whereas that expression that he's got in the meme isn't really on screen when he says that thing, but it goes together wonderfully, and I really like it as a forum response to stuff. Yeah, I was thinking it's just like what's happened in the 20-25 years since this has been released is that memes have become a way of fan expression, just how kind of dominant they are, but what it means for movies like this just living in our consciousness and I guess I'm just interested in that whole thing. I would probably say, though, if I had to answer this question, just that when I realised, oh my God, I am watching a movie full of memes, was the Gandalf moment where Bilbo opens the door. I don't know if you've ever seen these.
I've not seen that one.
We're going to have to spend some time on LOTR memes subreddit.
Right.
Like it's anything which ends with which kind of rhymes with. I'll just show you. If you can fit it into a horrible compound word that sounds a bit like Gandalf, and then tee that up with a really complicated, what about very old friends? What about whatever? It's like, what about mice with strange hats? And then the next one is, I haven't done it well, but I'll show you.
I'm sure it's
later.
very funny when it's done well.
My favourite one is when Frodo wakes up in Rivendell and Gandalf's sitting there. He says to him, why didn't you meet us? Why didn't you meet us? Oh, I'm sorry, Frodo. I was delayed. And there's a fantastic video where it intercuts that line and it immediately cuts to some guy at a rave dressed up as Gandalf, like spinning like a neon stick around him, and there's like techno music playing. But in the edit, the techno music starts as it's on Ian McKellen's face as he's like remembering. And it's almost like I was at the rave, but I've got to tell him. I'll just tell him I was delayed. I was delayed. I love it so much.
Don't worry where I was.
Well, this episode, much like the film we've been talking about, has been a long one.
Yes.
But I have enjoyed it, and it's long to the point where I think we should probably postpone mailbag and do a bit more of maybe a bumper mailbag, or just some more mailbag.
You might say
in
an
the next
extended
episode.
edition of mailbag.
Extended edition mailbag in the next episode. But this is, I think, been by far our longest episode.
I reckon we can really squash down the two towers. I think we can do like a half hour. We'll do a half hour.
I'm sure we will. Yeah, I'm sure we will. But if you have anything you would like to ask us, or just anything that we have discussed that has prompted some thoughts about Lord of the Rings, about fandom, please do get in touch. Our email address is redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. We are on X, we are on Blue Sky. So please leave us a comment, and we will gather up the most interesting and funny and hilarious and talk about them in the next episode. And to play us out, here's an excerpt from the BBC radio adaptation of Fellowship of the Ring.
I thought that you might enjoy this particularly, Ro. I wanted to basically play you a small part of Ian Homer's Frodo, and this is maybe my favourite bit, so let me just cue this up.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead, the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet, until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet. And whither then I cannot say.
That sounds like a bit of old Bilbo's rhyming.
Shut up, Mary! And that's Ian Homer's Frodo.
You've been listening to Red Shirt Cinema Club. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just check the link in the description. We'd also love to hear from you. Email us at redshirtcinemaclub@gmail.com or follow us on social media. We'll be back with another episode next Monday. See you then.